Hello, everybody. Welcome back for day 2 of our conference. It's so nice to see so many of you back here. And of course, more people are going to be coming in every minute for this event. So I'm George Westerman. I was your host for yesterday. I'll continue to be your host for today. And we have another great day lined up of insights from all angles of this education to workforce gap. So what we want to do with this opening session is just kind of do a little review on yesterday and get ready for what's coming up today. So remember, this conference is supposed to host thought leaders from all parts of the equation to discuss how we can expand and create new opportunities. And certainly yesterday we had an awful lot of great material there and great insights from people on how to make that work. So before I go through what we covered, one of the things I thought I'd ask on this is just let's get 2 viewpoints on this gap, right? We have a lot of educators in the room. We also have a lot of employers and policy people aimed at getting people employed, nonprofits, policy people, employers there. So we'll have 2 polls for you. So let's go ahead and do these 2 quick polls and just get a quick question for where you stand on this question. So Nina, can you pop up that first poll? So this is for educators. So if you're an educator, an educational administrator, a training person, can you just answer this one quickly? As an educator, what's the biggest challenge you see in bridging this gap? Is it knowing what the employers want? Is it getting the real life work experience, the internships, the apprenticeships in there? Is it retaining students all the way through the program, which can be a challenge, right? Or is it finding resources and time to keep your courses up to date, keep them up to what the market needs? These are just 4 possible ways, but if you can choose one and let me know, this is for the educators in the room. Educators, education administrators. And I'm really curious to see what the answer is going to be on this because I have no idea what you're going to say. But in a minute, I'm sure the answers will come up. Okay, let's see how it's going. There we go. Okay, so it's a pretty interesting mix, getting people to stay through the whole degree program. It's a serious challenge. We certainly heard about that yesterday, right? That 2 years is a long time, and especially as you start to get skills, you can go off and get work there. One of the things that we've seen very interesting is this idea of building the certificates into the program, embedding them in the program, because then as you come and go, at least you have good on ramps and off ramps. But this can be a real challenge, and I'm sorry to see it's still there. But the interesting thing to me is how evenly this is split, right? Incorporating the real life work experience is very tricky. That means working with the employers, and employers may or may not be willing or able to make that happen. Interesting also that knowing what the employers want is still, it's a big challenge, right? It's 1/5 of you said that that's the biggest challenge you've got. And so hopefully some of the things that we're talking about here will help on that. Now, finding the resources, yeah, that's a perennial problem. So I'm sorry that you're in that situation, but I totally understand the situation you're in on that one. So let's flip it over now. So, we have a pretty even mix, but there certainly was an attention to knowing what employers want and incorporating real life work experiences, which are very much related to having those relationships with the employers so you can have those conversations, so you can build those real life work experiences. So let's go ahead, Nina, if you can pop up the one, the employers or anybody that works with employers, policy people, nonprofits, people who are in the business of getting these people into jobs. Can you answer a similar set of questions for your situation? As an employer or somebody who works with the employers, what's the biggest challenge you see in working with community colleges? Is it just finding enough graduates, or is it ensuring that the new graduates are qualified? Is it finding the right courses for your existing employees so they can come through and do the continuous learning? Or is it more that building partnerships rather than just hiring graduates? Now, same thing here. Choose the one that's most important to you. If you're trying to build partnerships and it's hard, that last one would be. If you don't really care about partnerships, it might be one of the others. But just go ahead and if you are an employer or somebody, a policy person, nonprofit, whoever, who works with employers, go ahead and share your challenge on this one. Okay, let's see how the answers are coming out. Finding the right programs for existing employees. I was not expecting that, but that's actually very interesting to see. So finding enough graduates is very interesting. So that would say that you feel like the people that are coming out of community colleges they have the skills that you need, and that's really good to see. Now there is this question, it's 1 out of 6 of you said making sure they're qualified. So that can be tricky, but it's nice to see mostly it's just finding enough of them. But the biggest thing is the right courses for your existing employees. And that's interesting also, as we went through our interviews and our benchmarking, there often can be a degree focus in a lot of these educational institutions. And that's not wrong, but the idea of the non-degree programs, making them as important, making them as streamlined, and connecting them as well as they can to employers is an important challenge. So we are seeing that there are some challenges here. Also, interestingly split here, pretty well evenly split, that we can do more on the community college side to build those relationships with the employers, to know what's needed, and to get those internship opportunities and those kinds of things. And similarly on the employers, especially it looks like on the incumbent, the continuing education, there's some opportunity there to engage more closely on both sides of this gap to make that more smooth and more ready for the situation. So thank you all for sharing those answers. Now, when we did the poll, so hopefully some of these things that are coming up here yesterday and today are going to help as we think through there. This whole changing face of community college education and how important it was to think through these institutions are not what they were. They are moving, and some of the things we heard in moving was the closer partnerships with employers, closer collaborations among each other, and also just this idea of carving up the curriculum into non-degree courses or into more modular courses that can go. There was a lot of really interesting things going on. Certainly from the education policy standpoint, we heard some great stories. And then we also saw some very interesting things from the cross-industry look. The healthcare employers that are going very well to helping to find their employees and move them up rather than trying to hire from externally. That's good for the employees and the employers. And also just how they're working with community colleges to make sure that their needs are being met. So, and then of course we had the book on the changing nature of workforce learning. So that was I found it a fascinating day. The fact that you're coming back, I think, means that hopefully you saw it as a fascinating day too. I want to share a couple things here that we are doing at MIT Open Learning that came up in the conversation and that that might be useful for you. Now, as I get ready to share these though, I'd like to give you guys an opportunity and ask you here, can you, as you think through what happened yesterday, what was a key insight, just one key insight that you had? And if you can put it in the chat. And what we typically do is this is a way of, when we do our executive education or whatever, the first session of the day tends to be think about yesterday and figure out what was a big insight so you can internalize and you can talk about it a little bit more. Now, we're not going to call you into rooms to do that, but let's make this kind of a similar kind of situation. What was a major insight that you saw yesterday, a kind of a takeaway from what it is? And just pop it into the chat if you could. I talked about a couple of takeaways already, but if you can add them in there, it'll be good for us all to hear what you thought there. So as you are doing that, I want to share two things that we are doing at Open Learning that could be useful. So one is the human skills matrix. And this came out of a silly professorish moment that I had at Jaywell, is we were hearing, we hire for the hard skills, but we fire for the soft skills. We hear we know how to find STEM training, but we don't know how to find the soft skill training. And so I asked the typical professor question, what do we mean by soft skills? What's the definition? And first of all, you don't say soft skills at MIT because we're such hard science here that the minute you say soft skills, people just assume it's not important. And so we call them professional skills, cross-transversal skills. We call them all these interesting things. Here at Jaywell, we call them the human skills. And so what we did after looking and finding 41 separate frameworks of these things, Glenda Stump, Katie Hall, and I put together a project to synthesize what we saw in those 41 frameworks. We did interviews to identify things that may or may not be in the framework that should have been there, and then developed it into this model. So if this model is useful for you, feel free to use it there. It certainly has things that came up a lot: creativity, critical thinking, professionalism, things that came up a lot yesterday. But there are also ones that they're not on very many of these frameworks, but they need to be. Things like comfort with ambiguity, integrity, right? Relationship curation actually came up yesterday. So the way to think about this is the top is doing, the bottom is leading, the left is me, the right is others. And so these are organized into how I think, how I interact with others, how I manage myself, how I manage or lead others. So once again, just if this is helpful as you frame up how you think about these human skills, it's out there for you to use. Now, looking at some of the takeaways here, we have units for eventually lifelong learning. Thank you for sharing that, Mary. It is really, really very interesting. So intensive performative and process education needed. Vesna, thank you for that. Yeah, it's got to be much more than just the classroom learning we have. Agile continuous education. Yeah, Bill and I are working with Sanjay and a team on that idea. We want to get there. I had done some studies of how learning and development is happening inside companies. And we're finding out there's a new model where the learning is much more atomized, much more personalized, much more optimized than it's ever been before. And what we're thinking in this world, in the ACE world, is how can we make that work across institutions, not just inside institutions? Okay. Apprenticeship light, good one, Rose. Upskilling existing workforce. This is Bill Bunvillian into jobs that require more technical skills as a way to solve. So this is Bill. You're talking, I think, about the what we saw at UPMC and at BIDMC, and how they're giving better career paths to their people, and it's better for them and the company. Professional skills, the whole role of credentials. Can you learn more about which models inform this research? There were 41 of them, Brienne. So, you can Google around and we can, certainly there are many of them out there, but the ones you would expect to be in there are in there, and we found others too. So we use an advisory committee made up of employers to make sure our training is on track. We don't have any politicians on the committee. Might want to give that a try. That's great. I'll tell Bob and the team about that you decided it'd be good to work with the politicians. It's been great having them on our MassBridge team. The SAIL framework. Yes, the SAIL framework's a good one there, Brienne. And effective employer partnerships in design and selective as well as. So this is an interesting one, right? This is the idea that this is not something the schools can do it by themselves. This is really going to have to be, if you're going to bridge the gap, we need to have people moving across the gap, but people also pulling them across the gap. We're going to need to have the collaboration to make the gap even smaller in the first place. And so this idea that we're doing it together with the employers and the schools, not just either one trying to do it on their own, I think is an interesting point. So thanks, everybody. As before, I was just delighted with the amount that you participated as a large group in your in yesterday. It's a large group listening to panels, but your comments, your questions were fantastic. And once again, thank you for putting in your insights here. Soft skills are very hard to measure and prove, absolutely. And what we're trying to do here now with this is put this out there. And now we're trying to find the best assessments, the best training mechanisms, and just let the world know about those. We're trying to build some role plays, but also there are other wonderful mechanisms already out there. So if you know of any, let me know. And as we start to publicize what we're finding in these areas for training and for assessment, we can definitely share that as part of it. And if you're interested, by the way, our team would love to talk to you. So that's one thing, the human skills matrix. It's just our framework on how you think through these. The other one that Sanjay mentioned it is this idea that we are building a digital credentials consortium. Right now, if you put something on your LinkedIn, there's no guarantee that you actually have that skill or you can have that experience or that degree. And so people call MIT all the time and say, did George graduate from MIT? And usually they did, but the fact they have to call is a problem, right? And as we get to this more atomized education, it's going to be even more tricky. So what we're thinking about is why not have a situation where if you have completed a course or completed a credential, it goes into a immutable data source so you can share it with anybody, but the only way it is even there is it's valid. And so then as you share it with people, they can assume it's valid, but they can also validate it. You can control what you share with who, but if it's there, it's real. That puts a lot of clarity on both sides of the labor market organization. And right now there are some things out there like the SACA credentials. Right now you can share your credential number and go on the SACA website and look it up. And it says, hey, did George get this or did somebody else get this credential numbered X? So some of those exist. What we're trying to do here in the Digital Credential Consortium, starting with a set of 12 institutions around the world, and then this will become public for anybody to use, is how can we put our transcripts? How can we put our open learning credentials and others in there into something that works cross institution? And that becomes now a wallet for everybody to use. And so you see, up here on the screen there, digitalcredentials.mit.edu. And of course, Susan shared a link to the paper also. Thank you, Susan, for doing that. So just to let you know that those are there. So where are we going now? We had that first look yesterday. We have another set of terrific sessions going on today. We're going to start with just manufacturing only. Some really great insights on how they're doing it for advanced manufacturing. We had the other industries earlier, and so we can figure out, how do those lessons apply or differ in the two areas. Coming up from there, we're going to have students in. What's it like to go through these programs? What worked and what didn't? What would you recommend for how to make these programs better to bridge that gap? After that, I'm delighted Celeste Carter from NSF is going to come in and talk about her experience in working with and funding educational institutions to solve some of these problems. And she just has 1,000 fascinating examples of how this has been done very well. She also has some great ideas on what some of the questions that need to be answered are. And last but not least, we'll have a session on statewide collaboration among institutions, among schools and the state, schools and employers to make that happen. So that's where we are coming up today. I hope you can stay with us for the day. I want to thank you, Brett, for being back for the beginning of it at the very minimum. So let's turn it over to Steve, who can share some more on just the logistics again. So how we're going to get in and out of these sessions.
Great. Thank you and welcome back to the second day of the conference. As we did yesterday, we are recording today, so note that as you're making comments and participating in discussion. If you have any technical issues that you need help with, please do use the chat feature at the bottom. If you'd like to access the English subtitles, they're under the live transcript button or the more button at the bottom of your screen, and you can turn those on there. And if you'd like to ask a formal question of the panels or presenters, you can put those in the Q&A stream by clicking on the Q&A button. You can also upvote other questions for attention by clicking on the thumbs up button. And again, if you have more to share or you have links or other things you'd like to contribute to the conversation, we are still maintaining the Padlet, and that can be found at bit.ly/MIT-MassBridge_Padlet. And that too will be in the chat. It is in the chat now. So again, welcome.
Great. So before we start our first session, there's something I'd like to do that we usually do at the end of the day, but I'd really like to do at the beginning of the day while people are here and still, and still energized, right? Steve, Nina, can you turn on your cameras for a minute? This is the organizing team. Steve and Nina and their team are doing anything technical, anything registration, anything getting back and forth between panels. The fact this goes so smoothly is completely to credit for all the work that they've done in advance and now to make this work. So I want to thank you both for all the hard work you've done to make this thing as smooth as it can be. And Steve Nelson on the other side, Steve has been our content producer. Steve is the one who just was unstoppable at trying to get the very best speakers we could find. Even when I thought, Steve, you're never going to get that person, he managed to get that person to come in. And he's also been working with the panelists and the groups to make sure that everybody's ready from the content side to really share a good story. So I just wanted to make sure that these three people who are really the ones who have just the reason that this program's going as well as it is, I just wanted to make sure you get the recognition. So can we all do kind of a virtual round of applause? Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so now we're ready to start our first panel. So let me turn it over to Craig McAtee, who's the Executive Director of the National Coalition for Advanced Technology Centers. Craig, take it away.
Hey, thanks so much, George. And what a great day yesterday was. And I see we're already poised to have another phenomenal day today. The first panel yesterday with the community college all the way through the keynotes with Bill and Sanjay and everything in between was just spot on. Great notes and great collaboration going on. A lot of you might know that if you know me, I spent 25 years in advanced manufacturing. I'm a recovering engineer, as I tell people, but for the last 20 years, I've been in workforce education from a community college in Cleveland called Cuyahoga, all the way through running the National Coalition of Advanced Technology Centers. And, it's really a great opportunity for us to be here together today. I've spent the last year working closely with MIT on the MassBridge project, and we really have synergized on the way. We've got over 170 community colleges in our membership network. But coupled with that, which is spot on with this, we've got over 45 corporate strategic partners, including Siemens. And Gail, I'm so glad you could be with us today and with the other folks today as well. We're going to focus on the 4 strategic pillars, if you will, of NCATC, and they range from the future of work with emerging trends and technologies in advanced manufacturing and technology, from Industry 3.0 to Industry 4.0 and beyond. And I think some of us will talk about that today. We'll also be talking about work-based learning, everything from internships to full-blown apprenticeships. And complementing that, how can we focus more on what we've heard of all day yesterday on competency-based education, coupled with applied learning and really understanding how to couple that with industry recognized credentials where appropriate. And last but certainly not least, we'll touch on a very important topic that weaves through everything: diversity, equity, and inclusion for all of our students and industries alike. And how do we get to a better place for that as we move forward too. So I'm delighted to be part of this. Before I turn it over to the panel and start asking some questions, I just want to have them quickly introduce themselves. And we'll start with Gail.
Good afternoon. I'm Gail Norris. I am with Siemens Industry, responsible for our customer education as well as our educational outreach in regards to our mechatronics program in the US. So I'm really happy to be here and excited to hear all of the insights that we're going to share.
Thanks, Gail, so much for being a partner of NCATC and this great organization today as well. How about you, Tom?
Yes, hello. My name is Tom Fitch. I'm the president of Beat Fog Nozzle in Greenfield, Massachusetts. I'm representing the small employer. I am also involved with the Greenfield Community College and heading up as chairperson for the Future Work Advisory Council, which is a group of businesses that come together and partner and help set curriculum and do work for the school. And finally, I've got involvement with Mass Hire and the Manufacturers Roundtable in the local area here. Andrew Baker and the team there does just a tremendous job on that end. So just a pleasure to be here, and I have already learned a ton. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. So good to have you with us, and can't wait to dive a little deeper here. But before that, Michael Cook, you and I have run into each other with Fanik and a few others, so glad to see you today, and I can't wait to hear some of your answers today and insights. But please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Craig, and thank you very much for putting such an interesting panel together. I really feel humbled to be with this group of people. So, Michael Cook, I work for Rock Automation. I'm director of our global academic organization that actually works and engages directly with high schools, community colleges, and universities across the globe. And really, the core of our mandate is to really bridge that learning, that applied learning from industry into the academic space. So I'm very excited to be here. I've had a lot of history, I guess, with some of your people from MIT, George Westerman in particular, the IoT Talent Consortium, and just very energized by what I think is really happening here. This is really pleased to be here.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael. So glad you could be with us as well. And last but not least, Frank from MIT. Would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Frank Field. I'm a senior research engineer at MIT. My research covers a lot of different domains, but why I'm here today is I'm part of the workforce road mapping project that is part of this on this MIT workforce studies that are going on. And so I've been out there trying to learn from some of the kinds of people like on my panel about what it is that are expected to be problems in the future, about what sort of technical needs they're going to be. And so I'm looking forward to hearing their answers myself.
Great. Well, without any further ado, we're going to spend about 5 minutes each on a couple key questions we kind of pre-loaded in advance as a study together, and then we're going to ask you along the way, starting now. Please type your questions in the Q&A that you'd like to ask specifically of any one of the panel members today, and we'll get to those as well as we move forward. But let's start with Gail. Ladies first, if you don't mind. What are the Industry 4.0 technologies that you believe will have the most significant transformative impact on key sectors, and when? Are they happening now, or what do you see?
I think there are a number. I think we've seen a number of them come to the forefront, and a lot of this has been driven by COVID. We're really seeing a huge deployment of automation and digitalization demand being driven as a result of the COVID impacts and the need to change what we're doing and how we're doing it. Now that people are on board, the cloud was maybe the first ramification with cyber right after that, cybersecurity, and now coming into edge and virtual. And what does that look like in the environment? I was reading a article today about the skills that we're teaching today are going to be obsolete by 2030 for our kids. So that idea that how are we going to predict those jobs needs and how are we going to train people for them in real time? Because we're not going to have 10 or 15 years to upskill them. It's going to be an immediate need as it rolls out. It's going to be a changing need, and we're going to have agile learners. So some of this is going to be around how we teach people to learn and how do we make that environment so that it is that growth mindset, that continuous learning environment for all of our cultures, that everybody is seeking new knowledge and driving to that. As we look at AI and data analytics and what all that brings to the forefront, the term, I told my kids that their jobs in the future may be robot wrangling, because we've got to figure out how to manage the AI. AI is forecasted to exceed HI within the next 5 to 10 years. If we don't have the right management of that, how are we going to control it so that we don't end up in a different environment than what we're anticipating? So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's really coming to fruition that we've been talking about for 10 years, and it's rapidly deploying, and it's creating new opportunities for a lot of folks and really stymieing a lot of other folks. So I'll go back to, we've got to have agile learners. We've got to have folks that are learning until they're ready to exit the workforce, which may be a lot longer.
I learned something yesterday, I believe, from Sanjay about the term atomizing curriculum, and we talk about chunkable size and modularization. Atomizing was a whole nother level for me, and I love that. So the small bite-sized chunks of knowledge, skills, and abilities, I think in a fast way is what you're talking about, Gail. I'm going to pivot real quick to Michael at Rockwell. Are robots really taking over millions of our jobs as their install base continues to grow? Or what do we need to know about this, Michael?
Robots are creating augmented capabilities for humans. I think that's perhaps the better way to look at it. They perhaps are displacing outdated skill sets. And so there's a migration of skill sets that's necessary to really wrap around how you integrate robotics into automation. And then from earlier discussion, this whole arena of soft skills and adaptability and how humans work with technology and interact with robotics. That's kind of the emerging area of disciplines that we're kind of looking at. And I think Gail mentioned artificial intelligence. As you look at data analytics and additional capabilities around robotics and how we work with them, I think the perspective is more how they augment and bring new capabilities and really displace those dirty jobs that are repetitive and not very pleasant for anybody to do. So the whole arena of collaborative robotics is more the discussion that I think that we're comfortable to have rather than just displacement.
I love it. That makes sense. That makes sense. And what we're seeing out there as well. So Gail, back to you. How will the technician job functions change, do you think, as I4O technologies continue to be adopted? I mean, will will existing functions decline or totally disappear, or will they become augmented, like the cobot example that Michael just mentioned? What do you think the new job functions will look like or be required in the next even 2 years, 3 years?
I think Michael stated it nicely. There is an augmentation that is going on. I believe one of the studies, I think it was McKinsey, but I won't swear to it. It could have been Frost and Sullivan, stated that for especially our operators and our maintenance technicians, we were looking at more or less 96, 97% of their jobs could be automated or augmented. And when you look at the augmentation factor, that then goes to that cobot realm that Michael was referring to, where you're really working side by side with the automation, and you've got to have a little higher level of skill set to be able to deal with that.
Yep.
Back to your, as we call them, employability skills, soft skills, whatever the term is, and you know, of course, George brought up the matrix at the beginning, spot on. But even with AI, we're talking about applied philosophy, applied, like ethics. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should, right? So
Exactly.
there's a lot of ethics around artificial intelligence in all kinds of spaces. So that's another piece of that applied employability skills that I think need to be part of the critical thinking and the teamwork and the communications that we all talk about all the time. So good point. Question for both of you, or anybody, just chime in on this one. What roles do you think K through 14, you know, high school, middle school, all the way through community college should play in the future of work, Industry 4.0 specifically? Can you define that a little bit? And anybody, just chime in on that, please. We'd love to.
I'll just volunteer.
Yeah.
If everybody can come out coding, that would be wonderful,
Okay.
because that is going to be a basic platform. And I think the other piece of that is, for me, I'll go back to it, that love of learning. Teach them to be curious and really love to learn. And that will stand us in good stead a long time.
Yeah, I think those are very good points, Craig. The digital literacy and the kind of the digital culture and mindset that needs to be developed takes a little longer to be developed. When we look at how these technologies integrate and the complexity, you really want to push the learning down into the school system so that you can actually build on these skill sets as you go. So I think that the push back into the school system and community college system tying in with the school system is going to provide a lot more vitality for us with manufacturing skill sets. So it's very critical, and that ties into the soft skill aspect. They're really the cultural element of working with these technologies, remote access and support, for example, you know, the distributed workforce and how you collaborate. Those are key elements there.
Makes sense. Anybody else want to chime in on this, Frank or Tom, on real quick? Just
Well,
Go ahead, Tom.
I just wanted to share, Gail, that was very well put. Excellent with the coding piece coming out. The unicorns for us are the players who know how to do the coding, but also work with their hands and bring it to that next level. So while doing the digital is important, we don't want to lose the ability for them to work with their hands and lose that passion as well.
good
I mean,
point.
I think the other dimension of that is that there's this increasing need for this ability to be critical thinking about the ways and what you get when you use these skills, the realization that they're all new and wonderful and they allow you to do lots of interesting things. But there's also this question of, once you've got this skill, how do you think creatively about what you do with it to be a productive member of a workforce? Because it's a lot to, there's a lot of our pedagogy always is oriented around always about what's the right way to do things, what's the right answer, and yet the secret of working together has much more to do about what's the right answer for this circumstance and with this condition, and that requires getting a little outside of the standard educational box when you're trying to make use of these tools.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that team teaching and approach to, collaborative, mentoring and all those things that we've seen a lot of great practices across the nation occurring. We just need to really amplify that and scale it up big time so that it's much more like real world working and in a career as you learn, which is a great segue to like some work-based learning type of things. And I just want to point out that, you know, we've got great folks here in the panel, but I will tell you, in the real world, Siemens and Rockwell Automation compete on a regular basis for some of their products across the globe that run automation. But here they are together, which is wonderful, collaborating on what we need to do better to get our future workforce and current workforce where they need to be, because we're all in this together, right? So thank you for that, and thank you for all that you're doing with education and workforce. I just want to state that. But I'm going to turn to Tom as a small rural community manufacturing company and that you run. You know, employer engagement in general in education has never been more important to really get to the root of what we need to be training and educating people on versus all the fluff that's come before it. And I'll say that out loud to anybody. But what do you feel are some of the best practices, Tom? I know you're working with Greenfield Community College, and some of the things that you've learned along the way from an employer engagement approach with the colleges and high schools. Just if you could share.
Sure. The path that got me here was when the new president, Dr. Solomon Fernandez, gave a call and said, I want to come out and tour your plant. And my first thought was, oh, she's reaching into my pocket. Here we go. But it was a terrific start to discussions that she asked real questions about what was going on within our business today and what was going to be happening here tomorrow. And it developed into further conversations. And then we started the Future Work Advisory Council, where we have local businesses coming together. So the key first thing is the communication is critical and really important, especially to reach in and find more than just the top 2 or 3 large employers in the area, but for the educators who are here, reach out. I didn't contact the school first. They contacted us. We have always had, not always, but in the last 8 years through Mass Hire, they run a program at GCC, which is our basically an introductory CNC operator certification program. And what's terrific about that program is they've been over 85% of the students going through that program are getting placed at the end. So it's just fantastic results with that. And the reason that works is for the same reason that I illustrated before. It's communication. It's about the fact that those instructors, as well as the program leaders, are coming out and visiting the plants, talking about what's next and where it goes. We don't have the resources to have our own educational area here. So it's kind of interesting because there is a business 2 doors down and they've gone a different path. And they have a program where they're utilizing their own staff and their own equipment and developing their own training programs, and their advertisements for hiring say, no experience needed, we'll train you up, come in and make that happen. And I've been thinking a lot over the course of the past couple of years, the pros and cons on each of those. Clearly, an organization has to have the space to do it, whereas we're able to leverage the off hours of the local technical school to get it done. And it doesn't leverage the instructors very well. So they're there, they can teach at that point in time, but there is a real issue with finding a sufficient number of teachers, people who have the skill set and the ability to make that happen. So to find ways to be able to utilize that across a larger base, I think is really important. And then finally, I think it can be limiting for an organization if it's doing all its own training internally with people that are within the organization. Where do the fresh ideas come from, and how does that happen? So in that situation, I can see what they're doing. It's working remarkably well for them for the work that's going on, and it's terrific. I applaud them. They're also longer run jobs where we're each of our operators are seeing between 5 and 10 jobs per shift that they are running. We're a much more small batch. So that works really well. And I think the MassHire advanced manufacturing program that we're doing has been tremendous. And I started to listen in on the MassBridge MIT program because where the community college has not done everything we've needed it to do has been in the area of current employees trying to get to that next level. And this gets to be more of a challenge because like the basic learning is much more structured. It's very clear how to teach somebody the basics of G code and how to make that happen. But as we try and bring them to that next level, having a level of flexibility with the educational programs and not requiring everybody, well, I've got to find 20 people and they all have to learn this one thing. In our rural small area, we need to have something that has a bit more hybrid to it, where they can go at their own pace, where people can have some flexibility in the types of things that they're going to be learning so that they can stay with the passion that they have, as well as bring benefit to the organizations they're a part of. So that's why I'm really excited about what I've been hearing on some of the MassBridge MIT program.
Great, and it's great that a smaller employer compared to the Siemens and the Rockwells of the world has found a way to communicate and collaborate with the colleges and high schools, and that's what we've seen so much success from across the nation. So thanks for sharing some of that with us, Tom, today. And Mike, can we switch over to your involvement with the same kind of thing on a different scale when it comes to apprenticeships and work-based learning that you've worked with some other really good partners as well? Can you share some highlights of that?
Yeah, I think Tom makes a very good point. When you look at the fundamentals of automation and robotics and those things, the community colleges do a really good job. It's once we get into more integrated systems that it's less structured. There's less let's say credibility or consistency around the quality of the learning and the execution of that. And I think that's an area where I think as Rockwell we've looked at that and through the lens of how do we get together with other companies and figure out how to create apprenticeship pathways or programs that can allow an employer to actually have a registered or pre-registered or let's say an in-house apprenticeship type of program to enable the development of the employees to get to these integrated systems learning. And at the core of that is the community college that really can act as an anchor point for developing that talent. So we've looked at that through that lens and said, okay, well, let's get together with some of our industrial partners like Fanuc and Anderson House and others and figure out how to create a program that's really defined through the lens of the end user and not solely through the perspective of Rockwell, really to represent what industry is trying to adopt and where they at and what they're trying to do. So from that perspective, we've looked at creating apprenticeship programs that are more adaptable from the employers. If I put myself in your shoes, Tom, from your perspective, where do I go next? And how do I develop the next set of skill sets? And what are those pathways? And then how do those pathways actually align with, for example, the mainstream Massachusetts educational system? And where are the articulation points so that those people don't kind of get lost in some of these programs? And I think, see, Conrad Levy made a point. Hi, Conrad. There's an adaptability piece to this as well. I think Conrad's point was about short bursts of upskilling. An apprenticeship program, in its true format, can be 144 hours, a year. The state can put some definition around that. But from an employer perspective, you might just be looking for the next level of skills, and that could be like a 10-week boot camp over 6 months, 2 evenings a week at community college. And so there's an adaptability that's required, I think, on both the employer side as well as on the community college side as well, that can really enable that.
Spot on, spot on. I would like to just segue into our next topic, and then there's some good comments coming in, and I'm reading them quickly about those internships, co-ops, anything shorter term. Again, anything that we can take the time based off of and make it competency based with skills and knowledge, right? That's where you all want it to be. That's where a lot of the colleges and even high schools are moving, but it's like steering the Titanic. It's a very slow move, but we're making progress, and I appreciate all of you working toward that. But yeah, shorter programs like co-ops and internships. Anybody want to chime in on that real quick before we move on to the competency-based education?
If I may.
Yeah.
So utilizing apprenticeships through the schools and things like that, the employers who are here absolutely take advantage of that. They come in with ideas that we haven't thought of before, as well as the opportunity to have the next generation of players who are available to join our firm. And there was another piece to that, but I'm gonna pause there for right now.
It'll come back to you. It happens to me all the time, so thank you. But here's the deal: we're getting close to, we could do this all day. I told the team before we've only got 40 minutes, so a lot of employers are working toward removing degree requirements on job postings. The big IT companies, Google, Apple, et cetera, have already done it, and some smaller ones have. And I'd love to know what your thoughts about it. What we see is those are 20th century milestones. While they're nice to have as we move forward, but the smaller, chunkable, atomized credentials, and especially if they're industry recognized credentials coupled with them, like MSSC or NIMS or SACA that we've talked about already. What are your thoughts about how do we get more there than where we've been, in real world needs of shorter term programs and certifications, if you will, from industry? Anybody?
So I'll just say, we talk about Industry 4.0.
Yep.
With that, you've also got to think about HR 4.0. And really what the point I'm trying to get across is an alignment between the people in companies that are responsible for hiring, retaining, and mentoring and developing talent, and kind of what are the outcomes and strategies that you're looking for, and bringing those two pieces together. And I think at that point, you can then identify specific skill sets, you can loosen up your requirements, and you can see the role that credentials, such as SACA, micro credentials that are stackable and can look at upskilling. You can look at the shelf life of a 4-year degree and say, well, that person can now go and do a little bit more. And you can start to put actual talent development strategies together that incorporate all these aspects together with all the articulations and zigzag pathways, from high school to 2-year to 4-year to advanced degree. And I think opening up that perspective with an HR organization that actually is closely aligned to business units and those that are dealing with some of the more strategic directional functions of running a business, that's going to be the enabling factor. So I think industry is kind of ready. We're also going through some transformation. And I think that's really going to be what it's about, is looking at the outcomes that are unlocked from an economic perspective for a business by having those skill sets and then comprehending what that means and how to get there.
Yep. And what some of you are probably already working on helping get this policy funding set for short-term Pell. Anything under 600 hours has not been funded by Pell since its inception, and we're fighting with AACC, community colleges, to really get that passed. And it's an uphill battle, but I think it's got some legs, and we have some hope that it will pass soon. But that's for credit-based, short-term programs. Any insights from your perspective, Gail, on how we merge more industry-recognized credentials into the colleges and high schools curriculum to make them shorter term and real world, from your perspective?
One of the things that Tom brought up, which I'm really passionate about, is that ability to pull on the local colleges and the local schools to do ongoing skilling for your existing employees. Yeah. I think we're seeing that kind of merger start to take place, where we're starting to see the concentricity, and I don't even know if that's the right word, but I'll use it, of the schools partnering with the local employers to really drive those quick flip, what we're calling speed learning agendas that can be 6 weeks, 12 weeks, to take the mechanics and the techs up to that next level. And then they give them a bump in pay, and they've got another 6 or 12 weeks they can go through and get another bump. And it creates that continuous learning environment. It creates a continuously upskilled environment. So you're always moving people through the formation from operators through to a control engineer. And it's very viable, but it does require a very close cooperation between those two. So to your point, in regards to those certificate kind of programs, our own mechatronics program is being used in that fashion with several employers out in Western Nevada. And they're sending cohorts through about every 12 weeks to upskill their next team of technicians. And it works. So I think it's there in some instances. We just need to broaden the acceptance of it and have the conversations with the employers. What are you really trying to accomplish? Is it that degree or is it that skill set? And exactly what you said, we're having the competency skill-based conversations now with HR. Love the HR 4.0. And how do we move them in that direction? I think most of our HR organizations are very open to it, but we've got to push that more nimble, agile employee kind of concept to them as part of our strategic workforce plan, because it really changes the roadmap for the future.
Yep. Yeah, I think I'm going to adopt the HR 4.0 because we've already started talking about education 4.0 about 2 years ago, and so it all and I know, Michael, we're already beyond 4.0, right? We're
way
might
out
as well
there.
call it X.0 because it's never going to stop emerging, right? So,
Correct.
yeah. Frank, can we just give you a quick what are you seeing and hearing and in existing credentials that technicians will continue to need, and what future credentials do you think will be needed based on what you're knowing and seeing today and other studies?
Oh, I mean, it's interesting to hear the sort of this congruence of sentiment on credentialing, because certainly I will say that within the communities that we've been talking, which has mostly been the advanced manufacturing firms, the value of credential is sort of, it's a bipolar, it's a very polarizing topic. There are those who feel that credentialing is really important and can be really useful, and there are those who feel that credentialing is at best a poor, a minor signal that indicates that people are that this is a signifier of interest, and that so therefore this is an employee who is game to learn about this, but that a real concern as to whether the actual skill that is needed is going to be yielded when we look at what the credentialing actually has instilled in that. And so this really raises the interesting question about messaging, both about what the credentials provide and also some of the kinds of stories, like hearing Gail describe that what's working and what it takes to make credentialing in either small chunks or large chunks, however that works, how you see a real benefit to it, I think is a message that definitely needs to get out, because there's a lot of people who feel who have, you can definitely get some very strong negative responses on that subject, as thinking of it entirely as a barrier to entry, a hurdle that someone has to overcome before they're considered, rather than thinking of it as one of many possible dimensions that would indicate whether or not you're a likely candidate for a position.
Interesting that you mentioned that hurdle and barrier, because we've got a whole bunch of those, in my opinion, at colleges for entrance, for math and, English and all those things that you need remediated for. So, I mean, we've got no one size fits all, I guess. And the bottom line is we've got to figure out multiple ways to make this happen. And industry's got to be engaged, because that's what we're doing the training for and the educating, is to get a job or upskill your current job, as Gail and Michael just pointed out, which is a huge part of community colleges. So, yeah,
right.
But that leads into this diversity, equity, and inclusion thing, for second chance citizens and women in manufacturing and applied technologies and Black and brown populations in between. I mean, we've got a whole lot of folks that we haven't really addressed properly. Anybody want to chime in on that for the next minute before we go to the Q&A?
Yeah, I think, Craig, this is perhaps more than a minute, but I think we have an opportunity here to deepen industry engagement on helping find some of the occupational skill sets, but also to engage more broadly, not just upskilling or transitioning of veterans. But I think the key gap here is how do we expand and diversify the STEM talent pipeline? And I think the answer to that mostly lies in the high school space, where we can actually bring some hard-earned skills that will transfer into industry and well-paying jobs, and get young students on a pathway to well-paying jobs in smart manufacturing. And I think that's got to be the key to diversification, is expanding access and opportunities at the high school, and perhaps even at the middle school level, going back to what Gail was saying about coding. This is kind of multi-year stackable learning that takes some time. I think from our perspective, I think that's a big opportunity to converge on this discussion a little bit.
Yep. Well said. Well, I hate to do this, but we've only got a couple minutes before we've got to get turned over to Dr. John Liu on the next panel, which is extremely exciting because it's got students involved, and we want to hear from them as well. But the first question here that came in, while this person, Scott Ryan, can see and understand the need for growth learning mindset, Gail, that's, I think you brought up, he feels that his students and sometimes even himself don't take it to heart. How do we help get them to buy into the importance of this? Any thoughts? Gail?
I'll just say I'm probably the luckiest person on earth, because I had phenomenal teachers growing up and all through school and all through my business career. Mentors, folks that stretched me and grew me in ways I didn't know I could grow. And that's what I think each one of us has to do for our employees. That's what we have to encourage others to do as we mentor and we work with schools. How do we stretch them? How do we make them want to learn more? There's all kinds of ways to do it. And you just got to, in a lot of instances, find their passions so they're vested in it as well.
Well put. The next question I have here from Mr. Najed. Community colleges have a major burden of educating a diverse population of students, so we certainly know that, and foundational math and science skills required of being successful in any technical field. See, Frank, I knew I was onto something there. Is putting an additional challenge of teaching students the technical skills, digital skills, and other soft skills desired. How can it be done systematically? Well, if you have that answer, we got it made.
Right. I mean, I think a lot of that comes, right. Answering that question that's a tricky one, but I think the secret there, and I think I've heard a lot of it here in the conversations during this panel, is that it's about motivating the students themselves to understand that the purpose of learning skills is not to be able to say, look, I can extract the square root on paper, or I can, I can code up, loops in Python or whatever. But how does this help me do a job better? What do I get to allow me to be better at doing what I do now? Or how can I make myself a more valuable member of the workforce? And I think that kind of motivation, to Gail's point, is the kind of thing that really sort of gives them a reason to want to put up with some of the tedium of dealing with the remedial work, because it's what's in it for them as well as what's in it for us. And I think that's a really important message.
Yep. Well, we're at that point where we've got to really transition to the next panel, but I can't help but say we could do this for the rest of the afternoon with the industry folks, and you do bring so much to the table. I tell folks, because I came from industry, as you know, if you're not part of the solution, you are absolutely part of the problem. So get involved. I know all of you are, so thank you for that. And thank you for being with us today and sharing your expertise. And I would just say applied skills and knowledge is the key. We'll answer these other two questions that came in from the back here. But any final comments before we transfer over to the next group?
I'd just like to compliment MIT and the whole kind of MassBridge vision. I think it's so important for us to actually reach out to industry and actually change the perception and also the reality of the great opportunities in smart manufacturing today. So I'm just very appreciative to be here, and to Tom, and to meet Gail and Frank and you, Craig. I appreciate this leadership, and it takes all of us working together to really solve this and continue to compete at the highest level in manufacturing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ditto.
Yeah, thank you very much. From a small company perspective, it's challenging at times to make training and education be a strategic issue. And this really helps to elevate it to that higher strategic level, and the work by MIT and MassBridge to bring that about is very much appreciated. Thank you for putting this together.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Pleasure.
Now we're going to pivot to the student perspective, and Dr. John Liu will be the moderator for that. Again, thank you for everything. We could look forward to talking to you in the future. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Craig. Well, everyone, we spent a lot of time engaging a range of voices from government, industry, and academia, all discussing and all processing how we can help better bridge that education to workforce gap. And so now it's actually time to hear people who are bridging that gap today. And I'm excited to be moderating a panel of 5 all-star students and current or recent graduates. They're engaged in a variety of industries, ranging from photonics to healthcare, to manufacturing, to computer science. And after getting to know them just a little bit recently, I can say that it's going to be a treat for all of us today to hear about their journeys and their insights. So we have here, and I'm just going to introduce very quickly our 5, or I see 4 of us, 4 panelists. And the first one we have is Musi Demise. He studied computer science at Bunker Hill Community College and recently finished a bachelor's degree at MIT. And he's just starting last week, just started to work at Oracle. We have Jean Bazile, and he recently finished a photonics technician program at Stonehill Community College. And now he's interning as a clean room technician at IQE. Thank you. And next we have Greg Harris. He just finished a CNC operator training program at Greenfield Community College. And he's currently working in the quality department at VSS, which is a precision machining shop in Massachusetts. And next we have Caitlin Frick. She studied mechanical engineering at Springfield Technical Community College and now is studying advanced manufacturing at Northeastern. And she's a machinist at Peerless Precision. And finally, we have Marissa Nye. She's a recent grad from the Community Health Worker Program at Holyoke Community College. And currently she's working as a breastfeeding peer counselor at WIC and is interning at the Women of Color Health Equity Collective in Springfield. So to the 5 of you, thank you so much for joining me on this panel. We're really looking forward to hearing your stories and experiences and insights. So my first question to each of you, and we can go in alphabetical order starting from John, is if you would, in a few minutes each, could you share your education journey with us? So starting with, what were you doing before you embarked on this career? The key turning point that got you on this career path and milestones on this journey to bring you to where you are today. So starting with Jean. And Jean, you are mute.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for everybody in this panel. My name is Jean, but can also pronounce as Jean. I am a recent graduate from the Photonics Certificate Program. But before that, my journey started with Massasoit Community College. I graduated, probably like 12 years ago, as a business administration degree, moving from Massasoit to Bridgewater State. And then my kids were born, and then I had to drop out from school. I have twins, so I had to drop out from school so I can take care of my family. And yeah, and I waited probably 10 years before I went back to the schooling education, because my kids are like 12 now. And I bumped into this program just by coincidence, because right now I was doing design architecture for CVS. I did have a degree in design with Wentworth, CAD design. And I was doing that for CVS. So I was commuting from Brockton to Woonsocket, Rhode Island. So it's 50 miles each way. So I was doing like 100 miles every day. So I had my radio on. I had NPR, and then all of a sudden I heard something about photonics and how we need technicians. And then I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot, because it couldn't hurt. So first of all, I called Judy at MIT. So she gladly put me in contact with BSU, and BSU told me that, you know what, the session hasn't come in yet. So yeah. So this is my journey to photonics. So right now I am enrolled in Bridgewater to become a photonics engineering major. So the 4-year programs after the certificate. So I work at IQE. It's a great place to work if you want to know manufacturing semiconductors, what's technology it's going to do for you. So I was shocked to see, from certificate and then come into the field and then work exactly what I was learning at school. So yeah, I'm excited. IQE, like I said, it's a very, very, very good company for people who wants to learn and has technicians. So yeah, kudos to them. Kudos to my boss, Peter, because right now I'm at work, but they'll gladly let me, advance my career, and then, to just furthermore help the company, and then me by, investing in me. So yeah, it's a great opportunity for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jean. And just as a small note of background, Jean just mentioned Julie. That's Miss Julie Diop. She's the executive director of a center of manufacturing and knowledge at MIT called ICAM. So thank you, Jean. And so why don't we have Musi share his story next?
Yeah, thank you very much. So my story can kind of begin. Me and my parents immigrated here to the US, and initially had some immigration issues. So I just decided to work while waiting for that to be figured out. That's when I was looking into schools, because I had finished high school back in Ethiopia, and I found Bunker Hill Community College. While at Bunker Hill Community College, I had part-time jobs that I was working, from Walgreens to the Prudential to different places. But a few semesters in, I think 2 semesters in, I started working on campus, which really opened up my eyes to what I could achieve at Bunker Hill and what resources were available for me and for all students, honestly, and how much effort there was in terms of retaining students, making sure that they graduate. So I spent about 2.5 years at Bunker Hill Community College, got my degree in computer science. At Bunker Hill, I fell in love with MIT OCW, which is MIT Open Courseware, which is an open learning, open educational resources initiative that's 20 years old right now. But basically MIT publishes their courses for free online. And because of that, I had grown very fond of MIT. And I had applied to transfer. After I got my degree, I transferred to MIT, spent the last 3 years there, and recently graduated with my bachelor's in electrical engineering, computer science. And yeah, I'm on week 2 at software engineering at Oracle.
That's fantastic. And good luck to you, of course, at Oracle in your week 2. Greg?
Hi. So I worked at the Daily Hampshire Gazette in Northampton, Massachusetts for 19 years. I could see the trend of the industry for quite some time. And I had an employee who had left to go into manufacturing with a shop in Westfield. And we were discussing it before he had left. And he was going in as a trainee, making close to what I was making as a manager. And it really had me thinking about it. So I also heard an ad on the radio one day for the foundational manufacturing course through GCC. And I contacted Andrew Baker about it. And then COVID happened and my work schedule went haywire and I wasn't able to enter into it at that point because my schedule had just shifted so much and I began working nights. So a few months later, the Gazette made the decision to outsource all production. And as a consequence, I, along with about 30 other people, was laid off. And at that point, just through happenstance, Andrew Baker contacted me again and said, "We have another round of this coming up. Would you be interested in it?" I said, "You know, I'd actually would be. I have the time now." So I went through the foundational manufacturing course, which is really just kind of a basic introductory course to manufacturing. A lot of it was kind of familiar to me because I did work in a light manufacturing industry. I was on the production side. And then after that, I made the decision to enroll in the CNC course, which is was a 6-week course, about 120 hours, and which was also certainly introductory. You don't get in that compressed period of a time, you don't get the same thing as a student would who goes through all 4 years at a tech school. But what it gave me was an introduction to what's involved in it, a familiarity with terms, a familiarity with the machines, and it also gave me a leg up when I started my job search because the manufacturing industry is really, really hungry for experienced people. Most of the new hires I've seen in the last 6 months have almost no experience, if any at all. So I was able to leverage that into multiple job offers. And ultimately, I chose to go with BSS because I liked the people I met when I went there. And now, within 3 months, money-wise, I was making what I made as a manager. And without all the responsibility and hassles I had before. So it's been a very good experience. And it was a real good way in a short amount of period to make a complete career change. I had no training outside of the industry I was in previously. And I looked at the industry and the people I saw coming in were kind of sort of transient laborers. They were people who worked at this newspaper, but they closed down and they just kind of kept moving along to what few newspapers were open anymore. And I didn't want that for my life. And I didn't think it would also sustain me up until retirement. So I wanted something that had legs to it. And this seemed like the right thing.
Thank you, Greg. And you've touched on a number of themes that I'd like to return to after the intro. So thank you for highlighting a lot of points, really important ones. How about let's have Caitlin share next?
So I started my educational journey when I went to high school. I went to high school at Pathfinder Vocational High School in Palmer, Mass. And I studied manufacturing technology. So when I graduated in 2015, I decided that I wanted to go to college, but I wasn't too sure if I wanted to continue on with like my manufacturing experience or if I wanted to take it into engineering. So that's why I went to Springfield Technical Community College and I studied mechanical engineering technology because it incorporated a little bit of machining manufacturing with the like engineering and design. And it kind of gave me a little taste of both things. And I graduated from STIC in 2019 with my associate's degree. But during the time that I was at STIC, I was offered an internship from my current employer, Peerless Precision. So I really didn't have too much of a struggle to transition from, my education to a career because, I already had it kind of lined up when I came here. And so I continued on with my career. I currently work as a machinist, and I started out here working on CNC machines, and I decided that I kind of wanted to try out a couple different things. So I jumped around from different positions in my workplace, and now I work on a manual lathe, which is no automatic controls at all. And I love it. But during that time that I was trying to find my niche, I decided that I wanted to go back to college and pursue my bachelor's degree. So my old college, my community college, they were offering this articulation agreement with Northeastern University. So I decided to apply there, and I applied for advanced manufacturing systems, and I was accepted, and I have been studying there ever since. I'm hoping to be done with my bachelor's degree next year in 2022, and I plan on continuing to work for my current employer because, they gave me the opportunity to pursue my education and supported me and backed me 100%. So I feel like, this is the kind of environment that I want to be in. People who want you to do better, it will support you to do better. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
It's a fantastic
Thank you.
start, Caitlin. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Marissa?
I am Marissa. I just completed the community health worker program at HCC, Holyoke Community College. Before that, I had actually had my bachelor's degree in sociology already. I received that about 12 years ago or so now. I wasn't really doing much with that degree. I had been a patient care coordinator at a sleep organization, a health company. And after graduation, and then I moved on to some other things. I did retail and worked as a pet sitter for fearful and reactive animals, where I learned a lot. And then I got pregnant with my first child, and I thought that I wanted to give back to friends and family who didn't understand breastfeeding, because I knew that it took a lot for me to learn about breastfeeding, and it's a natural thing that doesn't always come naturally. So I thought that I really wanted to be an internationally board certified lactation consultant. And when I looked into doing that, I realized that it would have cost me $4,000 in classes to just be able to apply. And so I put that dream on hold for a while, and I became an office assistant instead. Then I had my second child a few years after that, and my passion for being a breastfeeding consultant was reignited, and I started looking into it again. And I did start looking into how to do it without having to go back and get another degree, but you really have to be a health worker already, and I didn't really have a lot of background in that yet. So I started taking science classes at HCC, you know, thinking that I would become a nurse first, and I was accepted into the nursing program. However, due to financial and personal reasons, I was not able to, I had to withdraw from the program before I even started. And that's when the community health worker program, which is a grant funded program, fell into my lap. And I spoke to my advisor, and I found out that it was actually a blessing in disguise that I found this program, because it was more the hands-on care, working with participants and clients who need that connection between the health that they need and their practitioners. So that's where I'm at now.
That's it. That is an incredible story, Marissa. I was trying to write down all of the little twists and turns that your career has taken, and it is phenomenal.
I have a lot of interests, so.
And quite a few interests. Yes. Thank you. So in sharing all 5 stories, what I've heard, and there's a lot of themes today, and unfortunately we have limited time, but I want to get first to interest and motivation, because each of you came from very different places. We have, and let's start with Marissa, Greg, and Jean. Each of you were in a previous career before. So whether that's design architecture, whether that's homemaking, administration, or it was in the print industry, right? You were fairly established and did fine in those careers before. And at some point you decided, you know what, this career is more attractive. So I'm going to ask you to give us your top 3 reasons for picking the one that you had the one that you are in now. And it could range for each of you. It could be interest just in the field, the purpose of, the purpose or the value that you add, the kind of value that you add. It could be the stability or the financial perspective. It could be community. It could be simply the commute, that it's more convenient. It could be the lifestyle that this type of career is compatible with. It's a lot of different things. We give you a minute to think, but whoever would like to share first, your top 3, and just give us keywords. Number 1, number 2, number 3. Jean, you are mute.
I don't mind going first. This is Gene. I was, like I said, I was doing architecture design for a very big firm, which is a CVS corporate, and I was making okay money, but I did a career change where right now I am kind of making half what I was making. So my salary got cut in half, but some people might said, "Oh, what are you doing that?" It's just to follow my passion. My passion since I was like a teenager, I was, opening TV, seeing exactly what's what I make my first transistor radio when I was like 8. So with transistors, by connecting transistors and speakers and old batteries. So that was my passion. Architectural design was something that sustained me and my family. And like I said, right now, my kids, they're turning 13 and they're looking for college. So it's like me following my passion. And hopefully that IQE will see exactly what kind of person I am, how reliable I am, and how knowledgeable I am with this field. And hopefully I'll get a pay raise. But right now, it's like I'm making half of what I was making. So coming from architecture design to a technician, it's like cutting your salary in half. But kudos to my advisor that says, listen, if it's your passion, you want to go for it. You never know. You could just continue, and then within 5 years, you'll probably be successful at it. So yeah, I'm giving it a shot, and so we'll see exactly what's going on, because right now my internship is finishing probably like in 2 months at IQE. Hopefully, I'll be transitioning to a better career. Now, I want to stay at IQE, to be honest with you, but like I said, it's the salary wise is not what I was making, at least not half, but 2/5 of what, it's just, it's a decision that I need to make. And probably going to General Dynamic, which is the neighbor of IQE, which is more military and background, and then more sophisticated.
Thank you, Jean. And it's I just have to say, it's so compelling to hear, because often in our workforce discussions, we do discuss salary quite a bit, but here you are taking a pay cut because you're so passionate about this field of photonics and semiconductors. That's very compelling.
Right.
How about Greg or Marissa?
Salary was initially a concern for me. That was one of the reasons why I had initially gone for the nursing program first, because of the salary. But ultimately, what brought me to my current position as a breastfeeding peer counselor was, like Jean was saying, the passion of doing that job and giving back to breastfeeding individuals who otherwise wouldn't have anywhere to turn, or maybe even if they do, it's just an extra support that they can have as a WIC participant. WIC is, for those who don't know, is for women, infants, and children's program. And so I was a participant of WIC, and so that's how I got involved to begin with. And just receiving that care myself made me that much more passionate to give back to moms and breastfeeding individuals that are kind of following a similar path that I had. And so I guess along with that, the passion is the community, being able to share my experiences with the community members of WIC.
So seeing that value that you can add to your community, that sounds to be quite a driver in your decisions.
Yes, and the internationally board certified lactation consultants track, a lot of people had given me the advice that I should be an IBCLC and open up my own practice because they make a lot more money, but everyone should have access to this kind of healthcare for breastfeeding individuals. And so it's not enough for me to be making money and helping people who can pay that. There are a lot of people who can't pay for that and still deserve that care.
It's fantastic. Wow, thank you. Greg?
I would say that my 3 reasons are probably money, stability, and future. I was able, without having any sort of advanced degree, make lateral moves pay-wise in a career that I'm just starting off in, at the entry level. And it's a career that has both stability and future, in that even if the company I'm at, something happens and it closes or sells out or anything like that, I now have hard transferable skills where I can go somewhere else. Or if I choose to leave of my own accord and go somewhere else, I'm able to do that. I walked into it, I had a lot of soft skills from my time at the Gazette, and but I didn't have any hard skills. I'd gone on interviews prior to doing this, and I just couldn't answer questions about the industry because I had no idea what I was getting into, no idea what I was doing. And now I can do that. And as time goes on and I gain more skills, it'll raise my stock.
Yep. Thank you. So salary stability and future. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that. Caitlin and Musi, you two have had what we could say a little bit more of a linear or more focused journey from the beginning to now, even if they've come with their own turns, but as far as goals wise, what would you say? Because even if you heard from the previous session, you know, there's a lot of discussion around high school or the earlier years, formative years. So in your more formative years, when you're thinking about, you know, what would be a great, promising career, what led you to advanced manufacturing or computer science? What was it that really sparked your interest?
I can go first. So I did high school back in Ethiopia, and in high school I followed you can either go into sciences or social sciences. So I was already kind of somewhat pigeonholed in the sciences, and that was through my choice. But I think the main reason why I chose computer science is because I come from a resource constrained environment. And computer science really seemed like one of those careers where it didn't take too much. It wasn't capital intensive. It wasn't a lot of the roadblocks to making something impactful that existed in other industries didn't seem to exist within computer science. And really, I zoomed in on computer science once I got to Bunker Hill Community College, when I had a list of majors to choose from. So the major things in my head were, one, I'm coming from a low resource area and I want to go back to that low resource area and do impactful work. So what can allow me to do that? Secondly, what's in front of me? What are my options, and how can I make the best of what I have? And I love problem solving. So, and I think a lot of industries have that, honestly, but it kind of, that intersection felt good.
Thanks, Musi. Caitlin?
I think the aspect that really made me go into manufacturing and kind of engineering is I've always been interested in like technology, and I honestly think technology is amazing, and I kind of wanted to become a part of that because I feel like sometimes I might be like, oh, I can't do this, or oh, I could never do any meaningful work to like change things. And I went into that was the driving force for me to go into manufacturing, because I did like designing things in high school. Like I've taken a lot of engineering specific classes, like I wouldn't say engineering, like engineering technology classes in high school that kind of taught you like how to like use like CAD and CAM and things. And I'm like, I would sit there and draw things and make things, and I'm like, wow, like I could do this for a living. Like it seems like it was something that really like piqued my interest. And then when I decided to do machining back in high school, I like the idea that I could take things that I designed in the computer that could be, useful or meaningful, and I can make it into something that I can hold in my hands. Like I don't know if you know what like a speed handle is for like a vise, but I designed a speed handle when I was in high school, and I made it, and I was like, wow, like I can actually hold this in my hands. Like I made this. Mm-hmm. But I think that's why that really was the driving force, is being able to like test my limits, like what I'm able to do.
So what I'm hearing from Lucy and Caitlin is both the interest and passion in the field, whether it's the fulfillment of making something or designing something, and also a desire for impact, going back to your community through technology, making a positive impact. So those are, thank you for sharing, both of you. And now I want to, all five of you have shared actually quite a range of different education programs at this point, ranging from high school and voc ed high school, community college, to also professional programs, to university level degrees as well. So what I'd like to ask you is if you can help us, help the audience understand what were some of the key elements in your education programs that helped you succeed. So clearly you're all people of incredible passion and drive, but what were the things in the programs that helped you get to where you are now? And anyone who has an answer can go first.
I think for me, it was the program coordinators and my advisor, my professors. That was one key element. The program director. You know, if I didn't have the support from them, I wouldn't have been able to be successful in my program. It's probably the number one thing that helped me through my program.
Personally, for me, I would highlight a couple of things. One, back when I was at Bunker Hill, I was part of the Mass Life Sciences Internship Challenge, which, so I've been, in terms of the internships I've done, they've almost all exclusively been in medical devices and biotech. And that was kind of the first place I got a chance to see what that was like. So programs like that give you kind of somewhat protected access, because doing an internship, you're competing with a lot of people. And sometimes it can be difficult if you don't have the background to apply to these things. So programs such as the internship challenge for me have been pivotal. I think secondly, very active voices within the community colleges. So we had people that were very intentional about making sure that the students at Bunker Hill Community College transferred to four-year institutions, made sure they were looking out for jobs and all of that in their majors. And then I think lastly, from my industry experience side of it, I think one, there needs to be an appreciation of kind of the rationale, the decision-making rationale that students need to make when taking a position or when refusing a position. I've been offered non-paid positions where previously I was working 30 hours at very close to minimum wage, and those things fared better. And maybe in the long term, that was a wrong decision, but sometimes when you're resource constrained, you have to think about the short term. And so keeping that in mind when making these offers of trying to put yourself in the shoes of someone that does need to make these decisions. And secondly, kind of having being culturally open, and this doesn't necessarily mean, you know, for me as an Ethiopian, but for me, that a person that goes to community college, for someone that doesn't necessarily know all the customs of working and living in the US, I think the places that said, hey, we know it's okay if you need help, what they basically did was they aligned their goals with mine for my betterment. And that made it easier for me to align my goals with them of, you know, working really hard and making an impact at the organization that I was.
Wow, that's fascinating. Wow. Internships, active voices, an appreciation of the short-term versus long-term needs of the student, cultural openness. Wonderful. Anyone else? We'll take one more person and then we'll move on.
Mine was also the support I received throughout the program. It's a program that's partnered with Mass Hire as well as GCC. And in addition to just the satisfaction of seeing their students succeed, there's a vested interest in our success because of the state funding that comes with success, and as well as the industry partnering with it, the different companies that do it. We weren't able to do it because of COVID, but I guess normally they have a job fair where different companies from around the area come right there and interview students right on the spot. And the one-on-one coaching I received through Mass Hire, and as well as my instructors in the program, was really, really good to be able to help me find a new job.
Thanks, Greg. It does sound like, when we often talk about education, we focus a lot on curriculum, skills that industry is asking for, skills that we can offer in the community colleges or the programs. I think what many of you have highlighted today, though, is the support that's outside the classroom, the program director, the advising from your education to the workforce, job opportunities, coaching, and I think also hearing the support as far as culture and your own life stages as well. So that's a fascinating theme that seems to be coming out of all of what you've shared just now. I feel a little disappointed that we only have 3 minutes left because clearly, and I don't know if you're following the chat, our student panelists, but if you just see, there's many of our audiences here are saying just how inspiring your stories are and how much it, often when we discuss and make decisions, it's still often hard to pair it with faces, but what you're doing today is you're showing us and you're giving us the stories and you're allowing us to see the faces that are that we're working towards. So the final question I have, because we have a range of leaders in industry and academia and also government gather today. So my last question for you is, what do you want educators and policymakers, industry leaders to know about the student experience?
I'd like to take this one. So far, they are doing a fantastic jobs because right now they are recruiting the right student who is motivated. Because right now, for my program, photonics, manufacturing photonics, we started the class with I believe 14 students. 12 of us end up graduating. So I would say 98% of the class stick together, and it was a good ride. It was experience wide. It was very good. That's what motivated me to jump to Bridgewater State to the photonics engineering program so I can move on. And not only that, it's a race, because right now technology it doesn't wait for anybody. Okay, if the US does not take the leg up on this on the wave of technology, somebody is going to have to fill the gap, and we have brightest mind who can solve these problems, but it's just a matter of finding them. And so far, teacher, counselor, advisor have doing a fantastic jobs, and kudos to them for getting the student in the right place.
Thanks, Sean.
I'd really like to answer this question. I would really like everyone to know that I think I grew up with the idea that you went to university or college, you went to a 4-year, and that's what you did after college. That's what I graduated with 300 other students, and we had a big board up during senior week about everybody signed where they were going, and if it said a community college or a trade school or nothing, that was kind of looked down upon when I was in high school. And I want people to know that community college is not just an easy way out. It's not just an easy way to get a degree. I think that there are some people who use it as an easy way to get their gen eds knocked out before going to a 4-year, which is great for them. But for some people, it's a springboard for opportunity. So.
Great insight. Thank you, Marissa.
I think I can go next. Generally, for all the different parts, I think you said government. Bureaucracy blocks people. I've worked at Bunker Hill, and I know personally that the FAFSA application, I met people and I've worked with people that the FAFSA application, they didn't know too much, or they felt confused, or they thought they were being asked too many things and left. So be careful about bureaucracy, because it can be a blocker, even though, you know, there's a prize at the end. I think for educators and people in industry, people in these situations, they are rational. I think there's this kind of paternalistic way of thinking about people in community colleges so what I would say is be data driven, but listen. As in, there's a way we collect data that's very kind of numbers and not really human. So listening, I think, is the best tool at your arsenal. Listening to your students, your employees, and making sure they know the benefits. Not that there are benefits, but they make sure they know and they feel like they can utilize these benefits.
I can go next. I feel like it's important to, when you have like, you know, students or employees who are pursuing like training or certificates or like degrees, that like, to me, and I'm sure to other people, it's really important to have like that support system, like people in your workplace or like your teachers and, you know, professors that are pushing you to do better and be better and to improve your skills and, you know, be as marketable as possible. And, you know, and I feel like that's really important, because like in my personal experience, I feel like I probably wouldn't have gotten this far without like great professors, great teachers, you know, and great management people in my workplace. Like, and I feel like that's a great feeling that should be shared, you know, universally with everybody. So
Fantastic. Thank you. Greg?
I would say don't overlook somebody who's a little older, who's starting over. That was my case. I'm in my mid 40s, and it was definitely a fear of mine starting over, that I would get overlooked for young kids. But when you're older and you're starting over, you bring a lot of life experience with you, along with whatever training you have. And yeah, it's yeah, I think that's about it.
Thanks, Greg. And I do think to be able to crack the skills gap, we have to be able to look everywhere, wherever we have people who are willing and competent. And I think, Greg, you're a fantastic example of that. So to each of you, so Jean and Caitlin, Musi, Marissa, and Greg, thank you so much for your gift today. I hope you're seeing these comments, that there are a lot of people who are resonating, feeling challenged, and educated by your comments. And to Musi, you mentioned it's important that we listen. And that's what today has been about, that we get to listen to your stories, your experience, and your wisdom. So thank you very much for being generous with sharing your lives with us today. I hope to keep in touch. You have my contact, of course, and there's a number of others on the panel and in the comments here who are rooting for your success. So best of luck to your internships and your careers, to your new jobs. We're rooting for all of you, and we're rooting for the peers and the many others who will come after you. And we're listening because we want these pathways to be better for the people who come after you as well. So thank you very much to our student panelists. If you can join me to thank them. And everyone, I hope it was as informative and as inspiring for you as it was for me. We'll now take a 10-minute break and we'll come back. And when we come back, we'll have our keynote speaker, Celeste Carter from the National Science Foundation. So thank you very much.
So what we'll do, we're going to cut the break just a little bit short so we can start with Celeste Carter at 3 o'clock. The students were so fascinating. We all loved the extra little bit of time with them. But let's go ahead and do a 5-minute break and come back at 3 o'clock.
See you soon.
Welcome back, everybody, from that short break. Sorry the break was short. We want to make sure that we can get this next session started. Celeste Carter, Dr. Celeste Carter, is a microbiologist, PhD. She's been a professor, and in 2009, she went to NSF. And at NSF, she runs the ATE program, which is an essential element for driving innovation in undergraduate education. Celeste, we interviewed you about 2 months ago, I believe, for the MassBridge project. And I got to say, you just completely knocked my socks off, and actually the whole team. The stories you tell, the kinds of insights you have, and I'm just delighted that you've been able to make time to share some of that with our group here. So with that, I'll step out of the way and give you the floor.
Thank you very much, George. And I'd also initially like to say thank you very much to all of the students, because you really always have amazing stories and just amazing persistence and enthusiasm for moving forward. And so I wanted to thank everybody for that. Let me see if I can share my screen. I don't have a lot of slides, but I have a few slides. Okay, let me get this in screen sharing mode. Here we go. George, thank you for the introduction. As George said, I am the lead program officer for the National Science Foundation Advanced Technological Education Program, which is in the Division of Undergraduate Education at the which is housed in the Education and Human Resources Directorate. Sort of get all of that out of the way. I've provided my my email address at the bottom of this, just because I always love to hear from people. I know I've heard from some of the participants today following chat and questions that are part of the ATE community. I know the next panel will have Dr. Marilyn Barger talking to you. She is the center director and PI of one of the ATE centers. So it's a real pleasure to be here and talk to you a little bit about this program. I was thinking about the title of this convening, Bridging the Education Workforce Gap. And that's really what this ATE program has been about since it started. And it really is a result of bills that were introduced in Congress in 1992, Scientific and Advanced Technology Act, that was signed into law, that mandated the National Science Foundation to develop a program that looked at innovative strategies to educate the skilled technical workforce. And that's really the workforce that uses science and engineering skills to a great extent, but doesn't necessarily need a baccalaureate degree. So with that, this chart is hopefully showing you the pieces of the response to bridging that education workforce gap, which I really think is partnerships, strong committed partnerships. So here's a program that's looking at the skilled technical workforce with the position of skilled, or the definition of the skilled technical workforce. It places the two-year institutions in leadership roles. So community and technical colleges are in a leadership role. But Congress also said this program should be able to support grades 7 through 12, not just high schools, as well as four-year institutions. So you can see that even though in 1992, I don't believe the term career pathways was being used, this is a program that can support these pathways, and has. Another really important part is the partnerships with industry. It's absolutely critical to this program that every single project and center have committed industry partners. And in addition to that, economic development agencies, workforce investment boards, that whole sort of package comes together in this program. In fiscal year 21, in this fiscal year, which is just about wrapping up, the budget for this program was $75 million. So it's a fairly well-funded program at the National Science Foundation. It's not huge. The program was just reauthorized with bipartisan support, and the authorization for the ATE program going forward has a doubling of the budget to $150 million a year. Now that's authorization, not appropriation. So we'll see what happens with that. But this is it's a long-term, long-running program at the National Science Foundation that has been working on these partnerships for a long time. So I think it's really worth looking at some of what's happened with this program. We have a sort of a resource hub, which is called ATE Central. It's housed at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And on ATE Central, you can find this map of active ATE projects and centers now. What I'd like to point out is there's a lot of dots there, right? And there's a few, there's a few states that don't have quite as many. If you look at over the course of this program, all states have been represented. In addition, you can kind of see Puerto Rico down there in the far right-hand corner. We're missing Hawaii, Guam, American Samoa Community College is a new awardee this year. So this is a program that has really been picked up and looked at and responded to by two-year institutions broadly. The colors there towards the bottom give you an idea of the sort of the breadth of this program. And thinking about advanced manufacturing, yes, there's a color just for advanced manufacturing. But if you think of biotech and chemical technologies, that's part of biomanufacturing and advanced manufacturing. Micro and nanotechnologies are part of advanced manufacturing. There's almost, think about cybersecurity. Everybody wants to know how to insert cybersecurity across the entire industry area. So there's a lot of things within this program that support advanced manufacturing. This just gives you another look at active projects versus active centers. There usually are somewhere around between 350 to 400 active projects and centers at any one time. Again, this just gives you a glimpse of those same sort of categorizations. But again, think about each one of these has a function in advanced manufacturing. So this really is a program that's responsive to this area. Here's a few really just two things that I wanted to point out if you have not seen these publications. On the left, we have from the National Academies, Building America's Skilled Technical Workforce. On the right, kind of crossing paths with the National Academy study. The National Science Board, the governing board of the National Science Foundation, became interested in the skilled technical workforce. And so a special task force was convened. They traveled around the country for 2 years, going to community and technical colleges, interviewing faculty, talking to students. They came to the ATEPI conference for successive years, again, interviewing industry, students, and faculty. And this is the report that came out of that 2-year task force. So it's definitely worth looking at. This was something I thought, I'm really glad I attended the National Visiting Committee because we have a special project called Preparing Technicians for the Future of Work. And that was something that was talked about earlier in the convening today. This is sort of a sneak peek at a publication that isn't quite out yet, but you can actually reach it using this link that's at the bottom of this slide. And it's a framework for a cross-disciplinary STEM core thinking of the future of work. So it's both educator and industry recommendations for what needs to be in a 2-year technician education program around advanced digital literacy, around data knowledge and analysis, around business knowledge and processes. So you're welcome. Everybody's welcome. I actually asked everybody. I asked permission yesterday that I could leave this slide in this deck. So hopefully you will take advantage of that and check this out. And then finally, there is a new ATE solicitation out. I just wanted to point out that we are increasing the budget for some of the tracks. We have a new track on consortia for innovations in technician education. So 2 institutions with their industry partners working together could request a budget of up to 1.2 million. More than 2 could request a budget up to 3 million. And as always, this program is interested in addressing rural technician education, projects that broaden the diversity of the entry-level technical workforce, recruiting veterans, We actually have a couple of projects, actually more than that, that are looking at recruiting veterans. We're also looking at recruiting students with disabilities into STEM technician education programs. So we have a couple of projects within the portfolio that are looking at autistic students moving into these programs. So it's a really interesting program to look at. I wanted to talk about one very new opportunity. This is a Dear Colleague letter that was just published, and it's called the Start Dear Colleague letter. It's an opportunity to support students, faculty, and faculty-student teams from two-year institutions of higher education, working with the industry, university, cooperative resource centers, or research centers, excuse me, IUCRC, which is another program in the engineering directorate at the National Science Foundation. They are actively doing industry-driven research projects at these IUCRC sites. And there's a couple of ways that people could come into this supplement opportunity. One would be if you're an active ATE awardee, you partner with an IUCRC and the ATE award submits the supplement. The other, and this is where I think it's interesting for the larger population that's listening today, if you are close to an IUCRC site and you're interested in partnering with them, the IUCRC institution can submit the supplement and support two-year community college students and faculty in these research internships. So something I think, I'm hoping a lot of people will take a look at that and possibly think about coming in and partnering with the IUCRC sites. And they cross a lot of different areas. This brings us back to the resource hub, ATE Central. It is home to the ATE Impacts book. This is another opportunity for you to take a look at an overview of all of the ATE centers. At this point, there are 26 of them, and then a select set of projects in each of the areas covered by ATE. There's information on impacts and results. ATE Central also has a resource library. Everyone archives the materials they've developed in a project at ATE Central. So this is a good place to start, and the Impacts book is really I think a great publication. And then finally, for the ATE program, given the fact that many two-year institutions, a lot of the two-year institutions across the United States may or may not have a grant writer or even have a lot of experience coming in and requesting funding from a federal agency. So several years ago now, we started projects that supported mentoring of faculty at institutions who would like to craft a proposal for this ATE program. And this just gives you, there are several of them now. Mentor Links is one that is run through the American Association of Community Colleges. Mentor Connect, if anyone is thinking of crafting a proposal, regardless of whether it's to the National Science Foundation or not, Mentor Connect has a huge set of resources in their resource library. There's another one, Mentor Up, where Mentor Connect looks at institutions that have either never had an award from ATE or not had an award in the past 7 years. Mentor Up, that could be anyone. And then finally, Project Vision is looking at the idea that not only do you need to have a project that's faculty driven coming up, you also need to have your administration willing to support you. So Project Vision is looking at doing that type of thing, of looking at involving especially new presidents and boards of trustees, bringing them into the fold and sort of upping their awareness of this program and the opportunities available. And so let me check out, I see there's a couple of questions. Let's see, we've got how do we integrate educational practical areas, if not through conscious unified field of total knowledge? What do you think about natural and easy unifying transcendental approach to bridging the education workforce gap? Well, that could be a little tough to think about how to integrate it. I think communication is hugely important. And I think the committed partnerships that you develop are hugely important. And I think we've heard that. I also, one of the things that George didn't mention was I was at a community college in California, developed a biotechnology program there, and actually led and ran that program for 15 years. So before coming to the National Science Foundation permanently. So keeping in touch with your students, supporting your students, understanding where they're coming from, but also providing them the opportunity to understand where they are as far as their curiosity, their interest in a particular field. All of those things are all built into what you work with. And you know, I was at the Manufacturing USA Institute Nimble National Conference a couple of weeks ago, and I had one of the people who has a biomanufacturing program in California came up to me and he said, Celeste, I just want you to know that you changed my thinking about these programs. He goes, because an awful lot of your students moved right into research labs at places like Stanford and Berkeley. I was in Northern California. And he said, I never thought of that. Most of my students, he still has a biomanufacturing program. And his students were moving into places like the monoclonal antibody facility for Genentech. So there is I think an open door for people who keep their curiosity alive and are persistent, as the student panelists all talked about being. And so I think that it's not an insurmountable barrier to moving students, supporting them through with their career ideas. So let's see, and there's a lot of chats. Let me see. Most of it, well, we've got one person who said our college participated in Mentor Connect and is currently participating in Mentor Links on a different project they highly recommends. That's great. That's good to hear. We've got the various links for the things I talked about. And if there are other questions that you would like to post, I'm happy to answer them. Let me stop screen sharing. And I am here. So I am happy to answer any other questions that you might have, although I think I'm doing pretty well. I think it's 3:18 and I've got until 3:20.
So there are two questions. This is George again.
Oh, okay.
There's my question and another person's questions. Let's do the other person's questions first. What are the top priorities you're seeing for NSF ATE right now?
You know, one of the things I love about this program is that it's actually driven by industry. Because if you don't have a committed industry partner and you're not responding to a workforce need, you don't have an ATE proposal. So over the course of the years, you see various things coming and going. I think one of the things that has been increasing lately are things like the autonomous technologies. One of our newer centers is the National Center on Autonomous Technologies, and this covers everything from autonomous vehicles on land, both agricultural and cars and trucks on the highways, to drones, so air, and even underwater drones. So we have the Marine Technology Education Center, MATE, is part now of this National Center on Autonomous Technologies. Another area of growing interest, obviously, I think we would all say this, would be environmental education, climate change. We have another center that was just funded at Eastern Iowa Community College in environmental education and a focus on water technologies. We have a new advanced manufacturing center as well, a national one at Tunxus Community College. Dr. Karen Lucina Birch is the PI. And industry had a huge input into developing that advanced manufacturing center, covering really a broad range of sort of sub areas that all feed into advanced manufacturing. So I think that's industry drives it. I love it. I don't have to be sort of pulling out my crystal ball and thinking about what should I put in this next solicitation, because I always find that industry and educators are there ahead of me.
Well, thank you. And you actually answered the question I was going to ask, is what are some of the favorite stories you can share right now? And you've already talked about a few of those.
Sure. Well, another one I love is when you think about where students come from. And I know Iraj Najad had that question about students who come in. A community college or a technical college is an open door. And I still remember one of my students who came in who had a phlebotomy certificate, so he could draw blood. He was a recent immigrant from the Philippines to the United States, and he walked through the door and said, I want to go into biotechnology. He ended up getting a job after a one-year certificate with SRI, and was placed initially in the animal care facility. He was working for vets. He identified a microorganism that was actually infecting one of the animal rooms. He speciated it, and he drew up a standard operating procedure to control the spread of that infection to any other room at the facility. The vets didn't believe him, so they sent the isolate out, and it came back with the exact information that he had identified himself. So there's a lot of stories like that. I think we all look for that. I think the student panelists always do a great job. Another thing that people could look at, we host the Community College Innovation Challenge each year in partnership with the American Association of Community Colleges now. And you can check out the winner this year was a team of students from Pasadena Community College who did a bio nano project, coming up with a prototype for addressing, specifically putting a monoclonal antibody on a silver gold nanoparticle to target breast cancer cells. So there's a lot of curiosity, a lot of persistence, a lot of really smart people at two-year institutions. We need to take advantage of them.
Fantastic. And I'm sorry, I can't turn my camera on. So I'm just a voice talking to you instead of a face. There's something, some challenge going on right here. I just want to thank you for, host asked me to start my video. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So
all right.
Visible now. Great. I want to thank you for, first of all, sharing your time here with there, but I also want to thank you for what you've done here with the ATE program, right? You're saying, first of all, I've got money, I want to give it to people. But in addition to that, what you've done is you've built this entire ecosystem to help people understand how they can engage, to mentor them in the process. So you don't have to be a serial government grant winner. You're going to help them get there. And this community share and also the community to share the ideas across among the grant winners on what they're doing. So I want to thank you for all you've done. I want to thank you for making time to be here with this group. I'm sure you're going to get a lot of emails.
I hope so. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. So let's transition over to our next session then. And this is Megan Abella Bowen is one of the leaders on the Mass Tech side for this MassBridge project. And Megan comes in having spent over 12 years at Bristol Community College as the Associate Dean for STEM initiatives, among other things there. She comes in now to bring that very strong community college input and experience into the MassBridge project. And as I said, she's one of the big leaders on the Mass Tech side for making this happen. So Megan, you have this great panel on statewide agencies and collaboration.
Great, thank you, George. So I'd like to thank everybody, and a great presentation from Celeste, and we actually are going to feature an ATE center in our presentation today. But best of all, we are the group that's getting to back cleanup today. We have the role of bringing all of this together, of all the questions and things that were asked in the previous sessions. So as George said, my name is Megan Abella Bowen. I am with Mass Tech, and I oversee with my colleagues the MassBridge program. And basically, I think this is the session you've all been waiting for. We have the secret sauce of how partnerships and collaboration all come together, or at least they've got some really good programs, and I think you're going to really enjoy listening to them. So I'm going to do a quick introduction of each of our panelists, and then we're going to dive right into the meat of our session today. So I'm going to just go in order of I have them here. So I have Dr. Marilyn Barger. She is the director of the Florida Advanced Technology Education Center, FLATE, of Excellence, and that is part of the Florida Makes Network, which Florida Makes is part of the NIST Manufacturing Extension Partnership, or MEP Center. That's a lot of words there, but basically, before they joined the Florida MEP and Florida Makes, they were previously funded and founded as a National Science Foundation Advanced Technology Education Regional Center of Excellence. And FLATE's mission is to support manufacturing education in the K through 14 programs through outreach, professional development, and curriculum reform and technical research. Next, we have Dr. Amy Firestone. She is the Vice President of Apprenticeships Carolina for the South Carolina Technical College System, where she leads a multidisciplinary team in expanding youth and adult apprenticeships across the state. And before joining the Apprenticeship Carolina team, she served as the Dean of Continuing Education and Professional Development at Miami-Dade College. And bringing up our final person, Sue Smith. She is the Vice President for the School of Advanced Manufacturing, Engineering, and Applied Sciences at Ivy Tech Community College. And she has been with the college for 30 years in various roles, including corporate college, workforce development, both at the campus and state level, and her experiences in consulting, program development, and manufacturing. So with that, we're going to go ahead and kind of set the stage for our panel for today. Building off of some of the themes from yesterday, we heard about the importance of not just building partnerships, but having the capacity to collaborate. And we also heard about developing bold programs in partnership, but also getting beyond that existential debate about education to the actual tangible ideas. And I think that's what we're going to hear today. Our partners are going to talk about how they've been developing partnerships, those collaborations at a state level, and how they've gotten to those outputs. So with that, I'm going to toss up the first question, and then feel free, I can pass it on to each of you, but I want each of you to answer this one. And it's, to get us started, can each of you give us an overview of your programs? And then how did you develop your partnerships? And who are those partnerships developed with? So let me just go ahead and throw it over to Marilyn. Why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Okay, great. Thanks, thanks, Megan, and thank you, Celeste, for giving me at least a boot up start about the ATE program in general. So you'll know a little bit about the funding source that supported FLATE for quite a number of years. For 16 years, actually, we were a center in Florida for advanced manufacturing. It was a great opportunity for us to take the program as previously described and operationalize something that we had a big vision for at the time. We started with really focusing on curriculum that we could align across the state. Florida has a very robust statewide CTE system in the Department of Education, and that in our case in manufacturing would fall together under the same supervisor, and so you couldn't just have lots of different programs. And once the program is there, it stays in place and gets adopted and gets reviewed regularly by statute. But we did manage to, schools are very creative. We did manage to have about 5 different manufacturing programs around the state that were basically 100, the same program with different names and different outcomes. And we gathered a number of those people together and said, we're not serving our industry very well this way. We have a lot of metropolitan areas in the state where employers could hire from any one of 4 to 5 colleges at that time. And of course, that's not the same for the rural areas, but certainly we weren't doing them any favor, nor ourselves, by having separate programs and different programs, different names, slightly different courses, and the usual mess that curriculum can get into, or programs can get into over time. So I managed to over a year and a half's time, outline this with some data and show them the overlap between their programs and their student learning outcomes and that are represented in our frameworks. And, I got them to buy the Kool-Aid after listening a lot to their concerns and coming up with some solutions that required their commitment and some consolidation of things they were doing, but at the same time, things that would improve their programs and their stature at their individual colleges. I called this little group. At the beginning, there were 4 or 5 colleges, the community of the willing. and we set forth to revise and rewrite the frameworks. At that time, we had a great opportunity to start the journey of stackable credentials. We had the MSSC had just rolled out the door a year or two before that. We had a legislation in our state that focused on credentials in the high school that were transferable to colleges. And we wrapped all of that together in our program to develop what we ended up calling the engineering technology degree, that has a couple of tracks for advanced manufacturing and several others as well. So this program grew. We managed to hold it together by a regular meeting we had twice a year with the faculty and administrators for the engineering technology. It's called the ET Forum, and it's just become a thing that has a life of its own right now. And it drew colleges to that. So the partners we had, I'll step back a little bit and just say how we made this, how we operationalized this. We let the colleges work with their own regional industry. We brought in the Department of Education at a couple of levels who oversee these programs. We brought in our own industry advisory committees from FLATE. We had a national visiting committee and an advisory board as well. And put all of those pieces took all information from all of those pieces and built our degree program. So we needed to have buy-in from the regions, the local colleges, and their own industry partners and their own special needs, and built a flexible degree program that just became a thing of its own. Like I said, it became the place to be, and the place that colleges saw the advantages of it and would come to us and say, we want to move our degree. We want to start offering this program for our manufacturers because we think it offers the flexibility that they need and that we can support at the colleges.
Great. Marilyn, following up on that question, you started off with 5 community colleges, but where are you now? How many of the colleges are on board?
Oh, wow. We have programs at 23 colleges, and there's 28 now in Florida. 28 state and community colleges. We maybe don't know, but Florida community colleges evolved to state colleges, and all of them, I believe now, except one, offers a bachelor's of applied sciences as well as the 2-year degrees. So we're still talking about the technical associate of science degree in our state, which is transferable to 4-year institutions and also to those applied degree programs. We're very articulated in Florida. You can go anywhere. There's 10,000 2+2s, but there's really only one 2+2 from high school, from the community college to the state college bachelor degrees.
Great. We'll probably come back to that because I think we're going to hear some of that from Sue as well. Let me go ahead and jump to Sue then. And Sue, why don't you give us a little bit of background about your programs and again, the partnerships that you have developed?
Sure, thank you. Well, it's great to be here, and I give you a little bit about Ivy Tech too. For those of you who don't know Ivy Tech is the largest singly accredited community college in the United States. We're the largest post-secondary institution in Indiana. We really act as a blanketing the state with workforce opportunities, workforce training opportunities. For my School of Advanced Manufacturing, Engineering, and Applied Science, 22 of those campuses across the state have that program and have those labs in them. So our challenges really have been around upgrading faculty and labs and curriculum to Industry 4.0 levels. And we're the #1 manufacturing state, arguably. Amy might argue with that a little bit, but being in South Carolina, but we have actually 30% of our gross domestic product depends on manufacturing. So this problem is really critical for us and our manufacturing companies that we serve to get to that Industry 4.0 level. And so, we've got a long history of aligning with employers and developing partnerships. And I think that actually the current workforce issues and the skills that are needed and becoming even more technical have really brought them to the table more easily than maybe before, because they're more concerned now that the skills gap has been exacerbated. So we have a lot of large manufacturing companies like Cummins and Rolls-Royce and Honda and Allison, and they can have their own classes and own partnerships, right? But when they come together and we really truly have a cohort, which is what we're doing with this program, that's when you really have a lot of interest from students and a lot of interest from employers. And so that's the partnership that formed. And that has allowed us really to become more flexible. I know Marilyn mentioned flexibility, and our employers want flexibility. And so as we develop programs and degrees, we can't have everybody taking the same thing, because Cummins wants their own and Allison wants their own. And so how we ended up giving them that flexibility is we've developed an interdisciplinary option that they can use that stacks to one of our industrial technology degrees. And so in those, as we align our collaborations with the industry needs, and we align our curriculum with industry needs, that drove that development of interdisciplinary degrees. And we also always base our degrees and our degree outcomes on industry recognized certifications. And Marilyn mentioned MSSC. And earlier, Craig in his panel talked about SACA, which is the Smart Automation Certification Alliance. And so we worked with SACA and other community colleges across the country and national employers and Indiana employers to develop certifications in Industry 4.0. And then we mapped those certifications to our current curriculum, vetted those with employer partners, and said, is this really what you need? Had them take some of the tests so that they could say, yes, this is what we need, or no, this isn't what we need. And so how it ended up is we, after mapping to the SACA credentials to our current curriculum, we found that we had a huge hole. So we developed a new degree, and that degree has all those technologies, data analytics, virtual reality, augmented reality, machine learning, artificial intelligence. And so we use those certifications now to build a new degree. Then we worked with Amitral to upgrade our labs. And then we are upgrading our current curriculum with those SACA certifications where that's relevant. And our employer partners are right along with us saying, yes, please do this. Give us the graduates. We know we're going to need them in the future. We know we need those flexible skills. We know we need those agile skills. And, someone mentioned earlier, applied employability skills. So we know we need all of that. And so this SACA certifications and this certification model allow us to easily, through our Canvas shells, because we use flipped classroom like I think most everybody does, but through our Canvas shells, we add those certifications. Now we upgrade curriculum, upgrade labs, and the faculty get the certifications and we upgrade them. So we've done over 1,000 student certifications with our employers now in this pilot phase, which is ending in August. And we've got over 500 faculty certifications. So it's going well and employers are happy. So that's what we want.
Great. I think we'll probably come back to some more questions about that, certainly around the certification issue. The one question I did want to ask you is, with that curriculum and having the flexibility, but is there a certain amount of standardization across maybe the base level of those courses? And if so, what does that look like?
Sure. So, if we're looking at, and it's much like, developing their own apprenticeship, if you're going to have an industrial apprenticeship, chances are you're going to need basic electricity, right? So, there are some classes that you're just going to need for every manufacturing kind of program. And so, employer partners in the cohort, they'll usually agree to those, and then, they'll add on their little ones. And we've even developed special topics courses for manufacturers where we didn't have their particular composites class that they need or something else. So, but we put all of those on an elective list, and that elective list, then you can sub into those technical degrees. You can sub things off of that elective list. So yeah, there is a base of classes that, most everyone takes in manufacturing, and then moves on. 2 certifications, for example, that we use for SACA are basic operations and advanced operations. And so those will be in every one of those programs, and they're the 2 entry-level classes. So.
Great. And as I'm going to throw this question to you, but then we'll come back and also ask everybody else to answer it as we go through. But there is a question about what's the annual average number of graduates from your associate's degree and certificates from your programs, if you have that. I know it's still, you're at the very end of the first round.
Yeah, our degree starts in August, the SMDI degree. So the certifications around it are right at about 1,300 right now. But that's a certification that's crosswalk back to a class. That's not necessarily a degree outcome. But with with our regular programs in industrial technology and advanced automation robotics, we have anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 graduates annually across the state. And it might be up, if you're looking at AAS degrees, if you're looking at, technical certificates or certificates, the number goes up to probably 5,000, I'm just going to guess. But right now in Indiana, we have 15,000 openings for manufacturing, directly related manufacturing jobs. And so we're not hitting the mark, if you will, at this point, but.
Great, thank you. We'll come back in some more. Amy, let's go ahead and get you going, because I know there's going to be a lot of interest about your program, because we've been talking about apprenticeships throughout both days. So please go ahead and give us some background on your program.
Thank you very much, Megan, and enjoyed hearing Marilyn and Sue's remarks on their programs and their structure, because I know that we're all different in many ways, but I think we share a lot of common elements on being flexible with employers and also just meeting demand, and especially in manufacturing and all the different changes. So I'll start off by telling you about Apprenticeship Carolina. Apprenticeship Carolina is part of the South Carolina Technical College System, and we are a state agency, and we work statewide supporting employers and the 16 technical colleges located everywhere in the state on developing and registering apprenticeships with the U.S. Department of Labor. So that actually covers a little under 1,200 companies statewide. We have grown significantly since we started in 2007. And through this evolution of change, we have become a leader in youth apprenticeship programs, which are programs that are registered with DOL for 16 to 18-year-olds. And we've actually expanded that to serve 16 to 24-year-olds, with the older youth being from underserved communities. So those efforts are currently underway right now, but partnerships are huge. And I'm actually in Charleston, South Carolina right now, just coming from Myrtle Beach, because all those 16 technical colleges are the most critical partners for us at the state level to implementing apprenticeships. And I'll tell you kind of how that's done. We implement a 3D process, which is called discovery, design, and delivery. And we have many different roles located statewide that support employers and apprentices through that process. So as I mentioned, our main partners are at the technical colleges. And what we have done is actually develop a apprenticeship peer group for the state, in which each college president decides who the point of contact is on apprenticeships. And many times that's continuing education deans or vice presidents, but it's also folks on workforce and on the credit side. So it really just depends on the focus that each college has. And our team includes 20 individuals, and most of them are actually located at one of the technical colleges, working in collaboration with that peer group member. So that is a great infrastructure that I developed in the past couple of years to provide a consistent approach to our partnership and our communication with the colleges, instead of having a dozen different people at each college who maybe have some knowledge about apprenticeships and on the process and are involved. But within each college, there are also many different individuals from different departments who are involved in working with us and employers on the curriculum for the apprenticeships and on supporting the actual apprentices. So we have apprenticeship consultants on our team, registered program specialists, and youth apprenticeship coordinators, who all play a critical role in that 3D process. So we've been able to grow significantly through leveraging the partnerships with the college, and the colleges actually provide most of the classroom instruction for our apprenticeships. There are some exceptions to that, but usually the colleges provide exactly what the companies are looking for, or they can design the course for a cohort of students who are signed up for a particular apprenticeship program. So we see a little bit of everything included. But then to dig even deeper, we couldn't really do our work without the chambers of commerce in the surrounding areas, and also the state chamber, and also folks from the State Department of Education who are working directly with high school students. So there's a really long list of partners in each region that the team is closely working with on supporting companies and apprenticeships and apprentices. So our structure is complex in the fact that we try to serve employers and apprentices through every stage of the process, from design to implementation. And we're doing that at the local level, and then also at the state level. That's part of my role and all the folks who are helping manage the different grants that we have to support apprentices. So in a nutshell, there are many great partners who are helping make apprenticeships happen. And I remind the team that we couldn't do it by ourselves. We couldn't do it without the college. They couldn't do it without us and all the other partners. So we're helping employers customize their programs every single day and make updates to them as needed as well. So we're very flexible in our approach. And I would say another great thing that we just started was an employer council for all of our apprenticeship kind of champions, I would call them, in the state. So we have close to 20 employers from small, medium, and large companies across all industries who have come together to serve on an apprenticeship council to provide us with valuable feedback on the direction that Apprenticeship Carolina can take to support growth in the state. So those are probably the big things to share.
Great. All right. Well, those are great to get us started, because I think that gives everybody kind of an idea of where you're coming from. So now let's go into a little bit of the meat of some of the issues or some of the things that are challenges. So the second question we had was, each of your program has a level of standardization or consistency in programming across the state. How do your partnerships inform, influence, or help to drive that curriculum? I know you've spoken to it a little bit, but if you could go a little bit deeper into that, and I think I'll start with you, Amy, just because we finished with you, but that 3D program and also your employer council, can you tell how you utilize them to influence that?
Sure. So when we start a new apprenticeship, we get leads from many different places. Sometimes they're the technical colleges that are sending us leads based on other programs they have with the company, or they're economic developers in the region, chambers of commerce. The leads can come in from so many different areas. Sometimes I get emails myself from different companies or through LinkedIn. It can be a very kind of random approach to how employers reach out to us, which is great that we have multiple ways that we are learning about apprenticeship interest. But the process has many steps to it, even in that initial phase. So typically our team works very closely with whoever sent the lead, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce, the technical college, or us. We bring in the right partners for the initial meeting, because many times a company isn't sure if they want a credit-based or a continuing education-based program. They don't really understand the full offerings that the college has. So we ensure to bring them in at the beginning of the conversation. And that way the college can start planning, okay, if there are any courses that we need to develop, any instructors we need to bring in. So that's really with that discovery phase. And the design is really digging into the nuts and bolts of the apprenticeship standards that our team helps develop with the U.S. Department of Labor. And that includes a twofold process. One is really solidifying the job-related education, which takes place typically at one of the technical colleges, outlining the coursework and whether it's aligned to a degree program or a certificate program, or many different options there. And then working with the company to solidify the on-the-job training, which is, we call that the work process schedule. And so luckily we have a huge library of samples of other work process schedules we developed for different industries. And so our team can leverage that information to bring to the company so they can really see what skills do they need to be mastered throughout this apprenticeship program, and what technology does an individual need to be competent on. So that process happens hand in hand with the company. It's usually a lot of back and forth with them to finalize the on-the-job training, and also the wage schedule that can take some time as well, and piecing together how that curriculum is going to fit into that. We work very closely with the technical college on the timing of everything, because The classes may have a certain start time if it's credit or continuing education, and then aligning that with when the company would like for the apprentices to start on the job training. So there's a lot of different parts involved. And like I said, having the technical colleges be part of that is critical. That's not something that we could do on our own. And then our other team members who work directly with the apprentices, I think a couple might be on today, the youth apprenticeship coordinators. They're tasked with helping support the youth apprentices with the interview process and helping ensure that they're successful throughout the life of the program. So we're just getting started with those roles. But they're also closely coordinating with the colleges and with K-12 partners around the different counties they serve to help recruit students and ensure that they're successful. So every stage of that 3D process requires different partners and different kind of levels of engagement. So it is a complex process, but I think since we have a lot of staff focused and a lot of coordination with the colleges, with staff identified at the colleges to support these different areas, it helps make the process a little bit easier than before having all the staff there to support this.
Great, that's excellent. I'm sure there'll be some more questions on that. Let me jump back to Marilyn on that. So same question, Marilyn. How did your partnerships influence, and especially because you started again with 5, built out across the state, and you've got that flexibility in there?
Thanks, Megan, and great comments from Sue and Amy just now. So our partnerships have evolved, I guess I will say, is the best way to talk about this. I believe the meat of one of the big pieces of our success, besides the vehicle that we used with the engineering technology degree that has articulated credit for not just the MSSC, but for some other credentials as well that are tied only to post-secondary institutions as opposed to MSSC, which is tied to high school as well. As an organization, we let the colleges drive their own section and involve their industry boards and their associations regionally, and hovered over that with our view from the national level, as well as brought in always the national level, the competency models from the Department of Labor and other national standards for different aspects of manufacturing, as well as our own Florida board that we kept in contact with regularly. But the core of all that was certainly the meeting that we have twice a year, the Engineering Technology Forum, where all these stakeholders come together and just share what they're doing and what their local issues are, what our state issues are. It's a gathering of the college partners, the Department of Education at a couple of levels, our industry partners that may be regionally focused or more heavily populated by local industry, depending on where the meeting is housed. But that's a place where the colleges partners talk to each other. Maybe they don't talk to me so much anymore because now they know who's doing what or asking each other for help. And that community that has grown from that has become very, very strong and very networked together. It's been amazing to watch as I look back and see that, they kind of have their own thing. We administer a lot of the issues and oversee the issues that come up. We interfere with the department or interconnect with the Department of Education, who's really important for us. As the others have mentioned, we have some structures, some things we have to deal with that come down legislatively, but also policy that's in the department that we have to keep the challenge of being flexible and integrating non-credit with credit opportunities. It still has, we have eyes from the upper departments and upper echelons of our Department of Education overseeing that, plus the accreditations, which haven't been brought up here, but in this meeting, but there certainly is there's many barriers in our accrediting system at least in the South. So maybe Amy might know about that, but maybe not being an apprentices. So there's a lot of cooperation, I would say, and community, very important community. I think one important thing that I learned over the years was it's very important to listen to what their issues are and try to find someone who can help them if I can't help them directly at that moment. So I think it's growing that community with some mutual respect for everybody's role in the community, the industry, the colleges, the Department of Education, economic development has now joined in as well in our workforce. And I want to take one more step further, because as we've moved, we've just recently moved, I would say, moved from being at a college ourselves. The National Science Foundation Award was awarded to one of the colleges, Hillsborough Community College, where we resided for those 15 years. And now as a partner and a part of the Florida Makes Network, which is our MEP, we have very strong connections to statewide manufacturers through a number of the sub-organizations, I'll say, that are part of that network. The regional manufacturing associations that the colleges individually interacted with. Now I have contacts at the coordinating level between those at the state level. We have a workforce leadership council that is a group of those same manufacturers that within Florida Makes that focuses on workforce issues and ideas and pushing some agenda forward. I have a seat at that table. I have a seat at the technology table. Sue's been talking a lot about Industry 4.0. We're in those same conversations. We should interject to our technician programs.
Great, thank you. So Sue, coming back to you, and just again to kind of throw that question back up again, it's about those partnerships and how your partnerships, especially with your industry folks, have influenced the curriculum and your programming, where you went with it.
So we have a structure that is, again, we're singly accredited, so we act as one community college with several sites. And those sites can get more into the weeds with their employer partners as to what is actually needed for their programs or their curriculum, much like I think Marilyn and Amy are talking about having that flexibility again. But what that allows us to do really is to come together as a college. So we can't meet with everyone across the state of Indiana, but we have people who can, and people at all of those campuses who can meet with everyone and really get input from all of our, in my case, and in this project, our manufacturing companies, because they have, each program has its own advisory council. And so when we get that feedback, then the deans and the program chairs meet a few times a year to share that feedback. And then we change or address whatever concern brought up. And one of the reasons that we went to a flipped classroom model a number of years ago now is because we wanted that standardization, and our employer partners were demanding that standardization of curriculum across the state. So the Canvas shell that's used in the northern part of the state is the same all the rest of the state for that particular class. And so we ensure that at least the objectives are met in that class and they're the same. And so another reason that we went with a lot of certifications and vetted those with our employer partners is those certifications, they're an extra credential for students, and employers recognize that. They can be, they can be delivered in a credit or a non-credit format, and then we've crosswalked them to credit so they can stack those on into degree programs. But one of the most important things that we heard from employers is, the certifications actually give them some assurance of a level of competency. So it's not they got an A, B, C, or D in the class. It's they can do these 15 things, and they've demonstrated that because they have this third-party certification. And so we've been able to use those in that regard as well to really standardize that curriculum, that skill set, that competency across the state. And so in developing this new degree and using those, we already had that in place. So we got a lot of buy-in from our employer partners, for that kind of work. And one of our employer partners said, that, and it's a very large company, said they had gotten some business into their company, some more production, another line built into their company because they had a certified workforce, and that was a selling point that they had for getting that business.
All right, great. That's excellent. I'm actually going to take a couple of quick questions and then we'll kind of wrap everything up. So we have a question here that I'm opening up to anybody who wants to jump in, and it is, what's your opinion on performative unifying education or workforce teaching? Nobody's jumping up at that one.
You mean like OJT or?
So I'm not sure if the person who asked the question may double check, add another piece there. So when you talk about performative unified education, is that OJT? And this comes from Vesna. I don't know if you're still in and you can actually add an additional question. And while we're waiting, if that doesn't come up, then the other question was, I think this one's actually specifically to you, Amy. Do they all get a chance to do an internship or an apprenticeship, or only those students getting their associate's degree? What percentage get their associate degree? And I think that's because you talked about the youth apprenticeship as well.
Sure. So there's a couple of things to keep in mind. So when we help companies design the apprenticeships, we offer them the coursework that most closely aligns with the training that they need for the work processes, as I mentioned. So sometimes that's tied directly to an associate's degree. Sometimes it's just a non-credit program. And so we let the employers kind of see what the best fit is. So I don't have offhand the specific percentage, because some of the apprentices will do an apprenticeship and then they'll continue to study, or vice versa. So it's not something that we're able to very closely track, unfortunately, right now. But there are a lot of apprenticeships tied to associate's degrees, and especially Michelin, for example, the tire company has a lot of those programs, as well as BMW. So a lot of the auto manufacturers do have programs that are closely aligned with degree programs, but it is not a requirement per se. And especially at the youth level, a lot of them are finishing high school, they're duly enrolled in college courses, and some of them are able to earn an associate's degree with all of the college courses they have taken. It just depends really on the student and on the program and many other factors.
Okay, great. All right, so we got a little bit more clarification. So I'm going to follow back up on that question. And so it has to do with unifying multitasking art process stresses holistic and global, equaling global plus local way of meditative and easily absorbing and creating relevant knowledge. So I think they're getting at different ways of teaching and again working with student style. I'm not sure if I'm actually capturing that quite right, but I don't know if anybody has a sense. And they did give some links here, so I can share those with you as well later on. But it's, again, I think it's getting at understanding holistically in global ways, but also being responsive to what's happening locally.
I think that's, so I'll just jump in and take a stab at what I'm interpreting the question. I think certainly it's important for all students today and all employees or all young people as they're coming up in their careers to be exposed to the impacts that we have of being in a global economy. There's lots of multinational companies. There's a lot of connections between colleges and students in different areas that really it's important for them to get an idea of what else is out there. It's just another exposure that in the old days was probably just in your neighborhood or in your town, but now we have to really help them see that what we do here is impacted by the rest of the world, and what the rest of the world does impacts us. So it is important. I'm involved in the project that just put out that white paper that Celeste mentioned about cross-disciplinary technical kind of core skills and the impact of having the importance of what we've heard from industry of having technicians coming from our 2-year programs, knowing something about business processes, about digital and having some digital literacy, which crosses the gamut from IT to more hard new technologies, the sensors, the robots, the machines. And then also the third item that was in that list is the working with big data and understanding big data. That's a communication lane that is going to be important for all of industry. And so it's important both overseas and here and locally and wherever, that it's important to have our students understand that they're part of the whole world, the whole globe.
Great. All right, so we have been, we're up at our time, but George has been kind enough to give us an additional about 5 more minutes. So I want to use these last 5 minutes to really ask each of you, what's the 1 or 2 key things you would want, based on if you've been able to hear a lot of the sessions today, you think people would want to know, or that you think is the most important piece that has helped you to create your statewide partnerships and your statewide programs? And I'll go ahead and start with you, Sue.
You know, I can sum that up into one word, and that is listen. You know, you have to listen to what the needs are, and you have to be able to be so flexible that you can act on those needs and you can give employers what they want. You know, they aren't used to working with community colleges any more in the beginning than community colleges are used to working with them, right? So there's got to be that that partnership development, and partnership is a partnership that benefits everyone. So it's not just that it benefits the college or just that it benefits the employer. Everyone has to know their roles in partnership, whether it's, you know, the Indiana Manufacturers Association or the chamber or whomever. And we have to be flexible enough to make mistakes. You know, I mean, you have to fail forward in these partnerships, and they're not always going to go really perfectly. And so, yeah, I think that would be the takeaway for me.
Great, thank you. Amy, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I have to agree with Sue. I think the flexibility piece is the most important. I'll just tell you, with a lot of our federal grants, we're funding different apprentices coursework, and depending on the company and the number of apprentices, it can change by the day. The commitments can be set, you know, a few months ago, but a few apprentices dropped out, or a few apprentices want to join, or that company can no longer have an apprenticeship, but this company can. It's a different industry, or it's a different region. So I think it's just being very flexible and being able to meet those demands as they quickly shift, and that can happen, you know, week to week. And so being able to accommodate, move funds around, you know, get courses ready fast, get staff ready quickly is just kind of part of the environment that we're all in right now, with so many changes that are happening. So just being flexible and obviously listening is part of that. And really having a clear communication plan for the whole state on the program. So with apprenticeships, Apprenticeship Carolina is centralized in that my office is part of a state agency. It has a central leadership, but everyone is spread out around the state to help implement and carry out that message on what we're doing in our approach. So I think that is really important, is to providing the same level of customer service and reliability no matter where we're located in the state, and being very adaptable to all the changes.
Great, thank you. And Marilyn, you get to bring in the last word for today.
I'm bringing the last one. Well, I mentioned listening was important early on, and I think that's the beginning of the communication strategies. But we also have to learn how to really compromise with all of the partners, the educators, and our industry partners and our policymakers, et cetera. We have to be able to take whatever we've got and move it forward, and not be afraid of taking a risk and seeing what happens, because we won't get anywhere unless we try something and get our hands slapped. I think Sue mentioned that. going forward, that's really important to, just trying to move the ball and be creative about the approaches we take to try to meet everyone's needs, the students, the faculty, the industry, and our states, our agencies.
All right. Well, I really want to thank this group. It has been phenomenal. And I know there's not enough time because I think we could have taken 45 minutes with each one of your programs. But I do encourage the people who are attending today, if you want to learn more, please do reach out to our panelists. And again, thank you for your time. The information is phenomenal. And George, I'll pass it back over to you, I believe.
Wow, what an amazing day. What an amazing panel, what an amazing whole day of sessions here. And we want to just use the last few minutes to wrap up some of the things that we've heard. Megan and I are going to do this now, and also to, bring this whole thing to a close. So yesterday, I got together with Bill and with Farhad, and we each kind of shared some impressions going on. And I took the easy job of going first. And that way I didn't have to worry whether anybody said what I was going to say. Megan, why don't you do it? What are some impressions you have from today that you want to share with the group?
I think a couple of the key things that came out, well, certainly from our session just now, we've heard the listening. We've heard about the ability to make sure you're inviting the right people to the table. And that means actually just doing the invitation and then being willing to listen to them when they get there, because I think a lot of that collaboration happens when people are at the table. I also think you heard through several of our presentations here today was flexibility. I mean, that just came off at the very end there, flexibility, but also it is having a plan, having some structure, knowing the roles and responsibilities of the different players that you're bringing to the table. And then I also think there's that piece about bringing people on and building, nothing happens overnight. So you've got to build that buy-in. And that buy-in is about relationship building. And I think there was discussion yesterday about relationship building and how important that is. That even came through in the student panel today. The one key thing they walked away with was what helps them to be successful. It's those relationships. And that's something that in everything that we do, those relationships are important. So I think those are a couple of the key things. And then as I just kind of think back about yesterday, it's that capacity to collaborate. And it's that ability to get past, many times when we start off, and especially when we're thinking about large groups or bringing something to, bringing it all the way up to a state level, it's real easy to get caught in the minutia, like, here's what we're going to do, and basically committee ourselves to death. And at some point, you've got to take a step back and say, how do we get to those tangible outcomes? How do we drive towards what that is? And I think what you heard today in the groups that presented just in our session was they started with a big idea, maybe with a smaller idea at a regional level, and built it to a big idea by constantly making those steps. And I think even, and I'm not gonna quote Sue correctly, but it was like that falling forward, or basically you're gonna make the mistakes, but get up and keep on going. So those are kind of my big takeaways.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'm going to say some of the things that you said too, because it's impossible not to. This was just so important, right? On the organizational side, I heard two words over and over again. And one word we actually heard, and that was the word partnership. We must have heard that 100 times over the last 2 days. And it's so important because we have a gap and you can't cross this gap on your own. We all know that crossing organizational boundaries is an unnatural act. And so we all have to find ways to get across there. Luckily, we got people on both sides that are willing to think about it, but it does take somebody who's willing to take on that challenge. And as you said, Megan, to kind of push the envelope, to innovate, to don't accept no as an answer, right? And then to compromise and build that momentum. So the point, this key point that you can't cross this gap on your own. We need to get both sides working in, and we saw all these wonderful stories. But luckily, if I could add, we got people that are willing to help this. And so, what Celeste has done at NSF ATE to build up this infrastructure to help bring the bottom of that gap up a little bit, to help us move. What's happened with DoD and Mintech that brought us together to make the MassBridge project happen? What happens with the MEPs and the state agencies and all those others? The two groups don't need to do it on their own. There are people who want to help. But the nonprofits, what happens with JFF and others to make this happen? So I'm with you that this collaboration, the partnership is important. And what you had said about this other thing, it's a word that hadn't been said, but a word that occurred beneath the story over and over again, is this word of initiative. Somebody taking this on and making it theirs to own and to drive. to make those partnerships happen. What's nice about that, you get the people together, you got people with initiatives to drive this, and then it's no longer an unnatural act. We heard in your panel, for example, about how now this is just a way that people work in Ohio and South Carolina, in Florida, in Indiana, in other places. It's no longer unnatural. So on the organizational side, absolutely, I want to repeat what you said. I just repeated it with different words. And in the student side, oh my goodness, those stories were just incredible. And one of the takeaways I had from that is, we all have this idea that if we build it, they will come. Getting there as a student is a really hard task. And so each of these stories was not the idea that, hey, I grew up and, I was in a great place, and so then I just went on to school. They all had to overcome different challenges that they had to get there. They had to redirect or rethink what they were doing to make that happen. And so when I saw that, there's that initiative story again, right? That idea of following your passion, about reaching out and making it happen, contacting people out of the blue who might be able to help you. Who does that, right? We learn over time, but who does that when you're younger? And so once again, that's support. So just as the organization side, there's support to help us bridge that gap. These students depended on so much of support to make it through. And you had mentioned that, Megan. But what I walked away from that student panel was, why does our society make it so hard for these people? Why do we have to choose these people who are almost heroes to be able to move themselves forward? We as a society, we as educators and as employers need to make it easier for these people to make it through these changes. It's one of the things I'm delighted with hearing in these groups, these partnerships, these initiatives that are going on, that we are doing it. And I think we just need to do much more with the students in mind to know their stories. I think that'll help us with the listening and coming up with good ideas.
I agree. I'll just pull one last thing with the students, and I'm not going to get his name correct. So it was the young man who was from Bunker Hill Community College. And he talked about removing the barriers. And I elevate that to the partnerships and what we're doing with developing the programs. A lot of the times it's removing those barriers so we can start the conversations. And I think that's what you're seeing. And I know Craig just put it in the chat over here. It's either partner or perish. And I think a lot of times we made it hard for people to partner. Now we're working on ways to try to create those partnerships. And maybe sometimes they're messy, but as I think you heard from, especially Amy, you put in a really good process, and it allows all the partners to be active. The partners know their roles, and then they are able to continue to move towards that objective that they're looking for. So I think all those things are important, but removing those barriers and inviting people to the table is going to be the key.
Fantastic. Great. And by the way, we heard about some other things that were not on the program. Valerie in the chat was talking about the apprenticeship program that they built with Target Corp, and how they're having students work 20 hours a week and take classes 20 hours a week to get their MSSC certification. We hadn't heard about that. What a great program. It's nice it's nice that everybody could collaborate and put those in. Somebody contacted me on LinkedIn last night and told me about a Department of Labor grant that is going to Oregon, how they're going to build up stackable credentials for cybersecurity and advanced manufacturing. So this community, is not just the people that were speaking, it's the whole community. And that's been really, really great to hear how that's happening. Hopefully we can keep this community going forward. So we've reached the end. And so this is the time for thank yous. We gave a little bit of thank you before, but there's so much more that's required. I want to thank the speakers, the moderators for sharing the insights. I want to thank Megan, Farhad, Christine, the whole Mass Tech organization for helping us to put this event on and make this what it could be. We couldn't have done this, without us partnering to make this happen. I want to thank the organizing team, Nina, Steve, and all the other people that we can't mention at the moment that can make this happen. I want to thank all of you for so actively participating. This idea of the, Susan and others on the MIT side that have done, all this work behind the scenes to make this happen, right? I want to thank all of you. The amount of chat we had, the amount of good ideas coming in, the great questions coming in, the active participation. You could have sat back and just listened, but you made this active participation to really be part, to make this a community, even for the 2 days. That's been amazing too. So listen, my take on it, we've learned a lot. We've made a whole lot of new connections, and hopefully those will happen. Let's just find ways now to build on this, to really partner together to find more ideas, to drive more opportunity, to share our stories so we can all help to close the gap in our areas. So with that, let's finish the session. We will have recordings. We will get some information out to you on all of that as we move along. And I just want to thank you for a delightful 2 days of learning. See you later.
Well, thank you, George. I think that went really well.
Oh, that was fun. You know, it's interesting. You know, we can script those things out, and it just works so much better, I think, if we just talk.
Well, all right. I will see you later. I'm sure we will touch base.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.